Okay, so in previous weeks, we did just a little bit of quick review. The first week, we had the human imbalance, and the human imbalance is pretty much the cause of the human condition. The reason that we're in the situation that we're in is because, on average, the human mind is thinking from the time that they wake up, from the time that they go to bed. And typically that thought is repetitive, habitual, not making them feel well, comparing, contrasting, trying to figure it out, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, it leads to massive decay in human potential because we're not accessing that potential when we're just in a closed rut. Then we got into the nemesis. So the nemesis is something I made up to describe a force. It is a type of momentum that is a result of the human being acting and behaving and even thinking below the line of what we call active recognition. So attention is always shining. It is always isolating aspects of the available data. Our thought is one aspect of that available data. And so that attention is always going. It's always shining. It's always illuminating something. However, that process can be done without volition, will, and deliberate nature. And it falls below the level of, or it falls below the line of recognition. I'm going to avoid using the word level. So I'm going to say the line, like the above or below the line of recognition. Again, Ida and we were talking about words and how words are used. Level is another word that's kind of used to distinguish, people, to separate them. And to some extent, that can't be avoided. If you're doing a martial arts practice, we're talking about level of skill. Either you have accumulated some level of skill or you haven't. It's pretty much that simple. So sometimes the word level, there's nothing wrong with it, but a lot of times it's being used in a really arbitrary way to separate people into groups and like different classes, and it can even get into socioeconomic classes and stuff like that, and that gets a bit it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. So, and then topic 3 was it's actually a really important topic, but it's the difference between knowledge, intelligence, and wisdom. And that topic it's essential. It's one of the things that the words that we use, it's impossible for me to talk for too long and not use those words in some way. So there has to be clear definition on how we're using it. Knowledge has 3 parts: information, personal experience, the experience of others. And wisdom is when we remember and act on our knowledge. So I can't share wisdom with you. I can't give it to you. I can't share it. The best I can do is express it. The best you can do is express it. And then we have intelligence, that is a type of connection that we can make to the fabric of the cosmos, in a manner of speaking. And we can skip the knowledge and apply intelligence unto wisdom as well. But there's a prerequisite for that. And typically, the more we want to access intelligence, the more the mind has to be sound, the more it has to be, well, sound is a weird word to use, the more it has to be stable, if that makes sense. I have a note card that I've been carrying from my note card, and this is what I would expect. So very rarely previous to this have I ever said, what will this mindfulness system do for a person? I like to gather data. I want to see, at least empirically. I'm not capable right now of doing a large scientific experiment because this is an embodiment practice. When I went to the doctor's office, they told me that the last thing I ever do is recommend behavioral change because 999 out of 1,000 people aren't going to change their behavior because their doctor told them to. I've had a doctor tell me that typically a catalyst is necessary for behavioral change. So basically, you have to be about to die before somebody will cut away red meat at their doctor's recommendation. People make changes in their own time for whatever reason. That's what I'm talking about. But when a doctor tells them to do something, typically it goes in one ear and out the other, and people don't really want to change their behavior. Behavioral change is a real Dickens for most people. They're either going to use an incredible amount of force, which it's still not even guaranteed it will last in that example, or they just don't change really at all. They're just not interested in behavioral change. I am who I am. This is me, and I'm living my authentic self, and blah, blah, blah. So, but with that said, I think that I've had enough empirical evidence from people who have been practicing over the last few years to make these 5 claims. Number one, a peaceful mind. Oh, excuse me. Yeah. So a peaceful mind is a mind that is no longer at war with itself. So when I say settling, when I say balanced, it's because it's not fighting itself. Like I can't even tell you the last time that my mind was at war with itself. There may be times where thoughts are occurring and maybe they're starting to gain a little bit of momentum, whatever I'm thinking about, but they're not self-deprecating thoughts. They're not, I can't do this, or I can't do that, or I should be doing. So I just don't think that way anymore because my mind is no longer at war with itself. I would call that a peaceful mind / inner peace. So that's one of the 5 things that I would absolutely guarantee from these 20 topics, and also from the Qigong practice, because the Qigong practice delivers these 20 topics. It's over the course of a long period of time, though. Does that make sense? So number 2 is a calm attitude. So this is basically a mood, a demeanor. Your output is going to be more calm, more relaxed, more stable. Number 3, a balanced emotional state. You know, I'll write these on the whiteboard so I can save them and share them. I don't want to use the word virtues, but I'm just going to say the results of practice. Again, the word virtue, that was a word that was used once upon a time to enslave people's minds. So number 1 is a peaceful mind / inner peace. 2, it's funny when I say a calm attitude, because there's so many times where Shayna will say, Ernest, calm down. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, we need to just rewind time so you can see what uncalm really is. So now, because I am the way I am, if I do anything, if I even raise my voice a little bit, Ernest, calm down. And it's like, okay, guys, like even my son would say that sometimes. I'm like, we just need to do a husband swap, that TV show where they swap spouses. And you guys will see, spend a little time with a different man in the house, and you'll see what not calm really is. So let's not hold Ernest to this weird, thing.
Well, maybe they were just noting that you're not as calm as usual. Maybe they're just comparing you to you when they say calm down, not you to others.
Or I'm just using a little bit of extra bass in my voice for emphasis. That doesn't mean I'm not calm. It just means, Neo, get down. Kobe, get out of the street. I'm still calm. But yeah, you're right. I do see what you mean. That's fine.
I see the difference from when you start to rail against the machine and then you forget your line of thought. Like I can see that that's the closest I can see to you being uncalm. I've never seen you be agitated, but in relativity to your baseline calm, when when you get when you notice the habitual repetitive decay of a pattern of something in society that causes you, it's undesired for you, you can you start, your calm starts to modulate in a different place.
Yeah, I would say
You,
sometimes my
you
energy
can,
quickens a bit.
well, you can see from your earlier videos, your enthusiasm was more. I'm not saying that you're not. Obviously, you are enthusiastic about life, but in your earlier videos, your enthusiasm is more pronounced, let's say, where there's more of a balanced outlook, or possibly it's how you've learned to speak has changed also.
Mhm.
Sure. Well, it appears that you spend more time thinking about what to do instead of the focus on what's wrong with, or what's the error or the destroyers, and how that, and that's why you're so careful about words, because you don't want to use the same vernacular as the people who are pseudo practicing, thinking they're practicing, but using words but there's no evidence behaviorally of an actual practice. They're just using words about a practice. And so you try to stay away from those words so they don't get blurred in your delivery. But there's only so much you can avoid. We all speak we all speak English, and
True.
yeah, we can't get too hung up on avoiding those words. You just have to redefine them, like you did with the 3 parts of knowledge. Let's redefine them for the sake of our, let's define them for the sake of our communication, and then that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Even the word true. Like the moment I said that, I would have preferred to say I agree. So yeah, very deliberate with my language for a lot of those different reasons you mentioned. So, okay, so we have a peaceful state of mind and the calm attitude. And this could even be when shit's hitting the fan. It's, I've had so many times, it will look a lot like patience. Does that make sense? Did I spell that wrong? Patience, patience, patience. Okay. All right. These are like my official things that you can expect if you do this practice. A balanced emotional state. So we talk, calm attitude, balanced emotional state, those are pretty similar, right? They are, but the calm emotional state is including a variety of other things that when you talk about calm, that's kind of binary. It's either quickening or it's calming. So that's a very binary way of looking at it. What I'm talking about is going throughout your day, and because of the practice, we're aware of our emotional output. We know what emotions that we're producing. And so the balanced emotional state will look a lot like emotional intelligence. And so that would include all kinds of things, anger and jealousy, envy, all of these emotions. And some of those I don't even remember what they feel like. I don't even remember what jealousy and envy and all that stuff feels like. I'm so far removed from extreme emotions like that. I've been irritated recently, but even irritation seems to slowly dissipate. All right, and that's number 3. So a calm attitude is a little bit different than a balanced emotional state. They are similar. I'm not saying that they're exactly the same or completely different. Oh, we got 2 Idas again. 2's always better than 1. Well, unless it's not better than 1. Yeah. So a balanced emotional state is emotional intelligence. We can see what our emotions, how they're occurring. Eventually, we have something that we call deliberate modulation and sensing energy. Those are ways to interact with your own emotional state, your own energetic state of being, and it will prepare you for what I call shifting the lens of perception, which is a little bit different than deliberate modulation and sensing energy. Deliberate modulation is emotional memory. Sensing energy is paying attention to the infinite detail of the moment, the different characteristics, the essence that make up the moment, and then imprinting that into memory that you can recall later. So that's a process of memory. Shifting the lens of perception is something that's done with attention itself that will energetically shift your point of perception or the focus of your lens. And I can describe that later, but that is a more advanced technique, but it is definitely something that requires practice. You got to get good at it with the deliberate modulation and sensing energy. And then eventually it's not just memory that we're doing really anymore. We're able to shift our vibrational state to almost exactly what we want it to be at will. That's kind of the soup I'm surfing in now. And I can give examples of that, but that would be skipping ahead to topic number 18. So I don't want to skip ahead too soon, but yeah, Donna, did you have something to add there?
I have a question. In deliberate modulation, I guess it could be either, but unless you are intending it to be more specific, I find that I can deliberately modulate, I can choose to deliberately modulate to a feeling, a state of being, which has various data points that I have imprinted from before. Or I can deliberately modulate to something. It could be imagination, it could be connection, it could be again lots of data points to something outside of myself, usually something in nature. Deliberately modulating to the birds sitting on the railing. Deliberately modulate. It's one of my practices walking the boardwalk. When there's a lot of pigeons or seagulls, or there's some doves sometimes sitting along the edge of the, when it's not very populated, my energy, how I deliberately modulate, directly affects whether they're going to fly away as I walk by or whether they're going to stay where they are as I walk by. And so I deliberately modulate so that I can communicate my non-threatening energy as I walk by. And so sometimes I have to do something, sometimes I choose to do something behaviorally, like if there's a couple that have walked to the ground, I will walk out of the way and around them as if there was a person there, as opposed to staying my course so that they fly away because it's my course and I'm demanding my lane. And then the others perceive that as non-threatening, and so they don't fly away. And if I don't pay attention to that and I'm just I'm not including them in my data points, then I disrupt them. It causes a disruption. They recognize that I am not aware of them, and or I am overpowering I'm upsetting the modulation that's occurring in this space. So I think that's a combination of sensing energy and deliberately modulating. So sometimes it's an external thing that I am sensing and then modulating to, and sometimes it's an internal thing that I conjure with memory or imagination or both, and then modulate to that. Am I
Yeah,
am I explaining that
that's fine.
in
Yeah,
congruence to your definitions?
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a little bit different than anything I probably would have come up with because it's your example, but deliberate modulation and sensing energy can happen separately, or they can happen together, or they can go back and forth. You can really, have one foot in one and one foot in the other simultaneously as well.
I just wanted to make sure we were I was defining it the same way
Yeah.
and not inventing something totally different.
No, I think that I do think that what you're doing could get you closer to what I am describing with shifting your lens of perception. But yeah,
It becomes a dream walking thing if I am really engaging nature and well, not, people are nature, I guess, but it the more data I populate and I'm conscious of and modulate to or sense, then dream walking becomes the next accessible thing.
Correct. Yeah, because when we're deliberately modulating and we are sensing energy, it is under the assumption that we have already engaged our four directions of attention. And that's also under the assumption that we have started to clear some of the thoughts, which is why I say engage the space. And then deliberate modulation and sensing energy is even easier and more accessible because there's nothing in the way of us doing that. And then the result of all of that together equals, well, where are your problems? What do you mean? Where I don't have any problems, because I'm doing, and when a person can say, I have no problems, I'm not bored or otherwise at odds with the present moment, they're setting up dream walking.
Well, it could easily become thinking. I can think about walking carefully, think about not upsetting the birds, think about what I have to do that. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's not the same as
No.
engaging. If it becomes a thought process or a problem that I'm trying to solve is to walk by the birds without making them fly away, then
No.
I've lost it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that the qigong, the movement class, and really committing to a daily practice is going to make that going from sensing energy and deliberate modulation to thought again less likely, because if I lose my feet on the ground and my body in space, then I lose the connection and the deliberately modulating, and I go back into my thoughts. So I think the grounding of a physical practice is a balancing factor. Is a missing piece for me.
Sure.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I
No, that's
just as we were describing
I
those
could,
two things. I don't
sorry,
know if it was the topic we were going to discuss, but I just wanted to clarify.
all good. Yeah, no worries. There's no rules. What were you gonna say, Ida?
I was going to say I could never explain modulation. Just listening to both of you talk, I could never explain any of that, but I just know this, that when I go outside or look out the windows, which I do every day, and I know what's going on in my garden, in the trees, what stage nature's at, if there's anything different. I can know all that and feel all that, and like Donna says, walking by the seagulls or looking the seagull in the eye, you know how that seagull is going to react to you and where to walk, and I understand all of that, and but I could never describe it the way you both can.
Well, I'll,
You have never. It doesn't mean you can never.
right. And
Up until this point, it probably was a challenge for you, but that
Yes,
can
but I
change.
totally
And
understand what you're saying, but it's like I just go outside and notice things.
sometimes it's better, Ida. It's not necessarily a flaw. The fact that I can describe it sometimes gets in my way, because then I become the narrator and I've lost the deliberate modulation, and I've lost the sensing energy because I start to narrate it in my head. So um, I'm able to describe it now as Ernest is talking about it, because it brings back the memory of me doing it. And then I can articulate the words that as closely corresponds with the experience as I'm able. It's such an individual thing. It's hard to make words for, but it's not necessarily a skill to be admired when you're doing it, because that's what I want to avoid is the words. For me, it's very freeing to not have the words for it and to do what you just described. I can feel it, I can see my part in it, I can adapt to it, I can sense it, I can experience it. It's all a wonderful thing to have without the words, because you leave the words get in the way. They are the thoughts about it are the resistance. So I
Yes,
appreciate
I see
the
that.
compliment, but it's actually not always the best thing. In hindsight, maybe, or for this conversation, it's valuable, but
No,
in
I'm
the
just
moment,
observing how you both talk about it, and it's interesting to hear how you talk about it. And as you're talking about it, I think I do that. I do that. I've been uh, told, I was going to say accused of noticing too much. You know, how do you see that? How did you notice that? You know, these are comments that I get quite often,
and or
but
how did you paint that? How did you paint that? How did you get that feeling in
it's
that
the
painting?
nuances and things that, you know, the with the birds you can notice, you know, on the bird feeders, what birds populate them, what seeds they eat. More different groups of birds like the sparrows go to one type of food. Goldfinches go for a particular little black seed. Just different things, and the ones that prefer to eat on the ground. And I just noticed those things because, well, it's in my environment. And you talk about being never being bored. Well, you're not bored if you look outside and you know that this is what I've got. This is what I've got surrounding me. So I'm populating my bubble of perception with
Exactly.
what's around me. You know.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would say that you're really emphasizing what I would call sensing energy. So sensing the environment around you, the essence, the details. Now, what you're talking about in terms of the feeling that it gives you, if you're able to walk outside and immediately turn on that feeling, that's really close to deliberate modulation. When you're in a waiting room in a hospital and you're able to turn on that feeling, that's what I mean by shifting your lens of perception. They're
Yes, I can do that.
it's a little bit different too, right?
Yes, you have to use your imagination, obviously, but yes, I can do that. I
In the
can take myself out of a grey waiting room. Of course, it's never grey. There's always something to entertain me. Entertain,
Populating your bubble
there's
of
that word.
perception is
Yes.
populating your bubble of perception is exactly what you're doing
right.
with with what you desire to look, with things to appreciate. And I don't mean be joyful of, I just mean to appreciate the value of, the temperature of, the movement of, the geometry of, the color of, the essence of, whatever. You can find something to appreciate. You can find many things to appreciate to populate your bubble of perception. And then um, the thought is, there's much less thought in that because you are you
Like
are
like yesterday, Donna, when I was driving down to the hospital on my own and to drive through the city, and it really was chucking it down, really heavy rain. And you know what that's like with traffic. It's always a bit more, you know, well, you can't really see in front of you just the same way. And there were because I was really practicing, I found that I had set up my intentions beforehand, and I didn't allow the previous fear to come in, you know, about crossing lanes and getting onto the West Link. And so I used those directions as a mantra, and uh, was noticing the temperature in the car, the rain, and it really was, parts of it were really quite very pleasant. You know, I was in the warmth of the car, the rain, I love the rain anyway, but the rain was coming down, and I knew where I was going this time. I really did take notice of it, and to be um how can I describe it? Well, it just felt, I just felt really pleased with myself that I had navigated so well, if you know what I mean.
I feel really pleased with you because I know what it was for you before. But you know what? The drive was even more on paper, logically more challenging this time. You were going to the hospital. You still had all the same concerns about the health of your husband, and you also had physical challenges of the rain and driving in it. So there really wasn't a whole lot different about those data points. And the last time that you talked about that in class and what a challenge it was and how much fear was associated with it was a completely different experience than this time. And it really just had to do with what you were doing with your mind. It reminded me of something that William spoke about, and he was noticing the difference between when I said you can't not do something, you said, I wanted to avoid, your intention was to avoid all the fears and to do it that way again. And from your practice that what you need to do. So you can only do something. You can't not do something. So you didn't push away your fears. You didn't dissolve your fears. You didn't even change the circumstances because the circumstances were almost virtually the same. You chose what to do with your mind. You set your intention in advance. You chose where to place your mind. And in populating your bubble of perception, there was no room for the thoughts that caused the fears. So they didn't dissolve, they didn't go away. You just didn't allow any of them in because you were very busy populating your data with your practice points. And as a result, the results were that there were lots of things for you to appreciate that were lovely, not just not crappy, but lovely as well, even though you were on the way to the hospital. So you can't not do something. You can only do something else, and you did.
Thank you.
Yeah, that all makes sense. We did skip ahead terribly though in the 20 topics, and that's okay. But so I'll kind of redirect it back to kind of what we were back to.
Well, you did talk about sensing energy and deliberate modulation,
Yeah.
and you were talking about the results of the practice. So all of that applied.
That's so going back to the results. So we were on number 4. So the results of the practice through the empirical data that I've accumulated so far from people practicing, myself practicing, Shayna practicing, and then maybe even some other figures in the world that are practicing in one way or another. Is impeccable impeccable has 2 C's? 2 C's? That doesn't look right. The stupid chalkboard doesn't have spell check. So these are the 5 things that I can guarantee from this practice. And so what we're going to talk about today is the 5th topic out of 20, which is touching on the voice of power, the ways that we can use our mind and our own internal self-talk to help. Ultimately, it's to help go back to the practice. That's so if I talk about my thinking is either organizing a creative pursuit. It's organizing. It's typically just organizing something, or it's pointing back to the practice. That's pretty much all the thoughts I have. I don't really have a lot of thoughts about myself. I don't really have a lot of thoughts about other people. I don't compare and contrast, and I'm not trying to figure anything out. The burden of problems has been lifted. So everything I'm doing, I'm just doing because I can. I have 1,440 minutes in a day. I mean, I could just sit here and look out the window, and that's okay too, but I also just choose to do things that I find interesting, things that I think are creative and that play into the things that I enjoy, my strengths. Most people enjoy doing what they're good at. So I would expect as we get towards the end of this practice, people will use this practice to develop things that are already true to their nature and their character and their temperament so far, if that makes sense. So before I don't really like guarantees, especially a guarantee that I don't see any evidence of. I have to see evidence of it. And everything that Ida just mentioned in one way or another is a reflection of these 5 things. Right. So, we did talk about deliberate modulation. I think William Miller would really be able to relate in certain settings to what I mean, though, by altering the lens of perception. That can be done without this practice, But with this practice, we're doing it all the time. But when you look at certain types of Kung Fu, now if they take on if they embody the animal, like you can look at some teachers and some practitioners of antiquity, and they look like a bird. You know, you look at them and they look like a snake, like their facial features, their eyes, it's really in their eyes. You really see it. Now, when they first started doing this, they probably did a lot of the things that Ida was talking about. They used imagination, they used different ways of learning how to do this, maybe observing the animal really closely to see what does it look like, how does it move, what different things does it do with its hands, and or a praying mantis doesn't have hands. I don't know what we call those meat hooks, but you know, those little hooky things. But so they learn to do that, but that practitioner has gotten so good at that when they need to, they flip a switch. And when they flip that switch, they go into that. They modulate themselves. They don't necessarily need those tools that they use to practice up to that point. They can just turn it on. So I have seen this with certain types of especially like with sparring, or when you're getting more into the combat aspect, there are some people who can literally just shift their lens of perception, and then instantly they're an aggressive fighter. And then a moment ago, they were a very gentle, very relaxed, very calm, you know, completely different than what you're seeing with their aggression in that context. That's kind of a micro example of what I'm talking about. But of course, we would be using this for a wide variety of purposes later on. So that's kind of the small difference between deliberate modulation, which is emotional memory, and shifting your lens of perception, which will require no thought. It's like a switch. You're just shifting and modulating your lens of perception. Probably not to a praying mantis or a snake or something like that, but you can if you want to. Don't let me tell you what to do with your lens of perception. It's yours. But that's kind of an example. And the reason I mentioned William Miller is just because I'm sure that he's seen that before, if not in some contexts, able to do it himself, to where we can just flip a switch, and it's not something that we are kind of born with it, but it's still, we developed it, we practiced it. It's not something like imitating the mantis isn't something necessarily that we were born with, because we've never been exposed to a mantis before. So there are ways to kind of learn to do that, and they all involve clearing your mind. Thinking about being a mantis isn't how you modulate to the mantis, for example. Does that make sense? Yeah, William, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. The deliberate modulation and shifting that switch and intention and imagination all have some aspects of correlation to each other in your practice. And so even not from, it's very obvious as a martial artist in the combat sense, when people are beginning to, some of my students, I actually tell them, create a character so that when you're going to spar, and when you shadow box and outside of actually sparring, you cultivate this character. And the character may have certain attributes that you see as courageous, or that don't allow you to get emotionally upset when you get hit, or that doesn't engage in association with failure. You know, I work with my students on that. Some I don't even need to tell them that. Like, that's not they don't need that. They kind of naturally do that for themselves in their own way. And some, I can tell, they get stuck in something. And so that is a practice to help them get out of that and to find this. But I even found in the Tai Chi practice, and this is important, on my class on Saturday, I was talking to my students about intention, and that from the moment you start practicing and you allow your hands to move, you create a feeling, and you observe that feeling throughout the whole practice, so that if I'm sinking down, I'm relaxing. When I feel my shoulders relax and my chest relax, I let that same intention of relaxation continue down my body to the point that I create this sense of heaviness or fullness. And that becomes kind of what I imagine. It's not that I'm flipping a switch in this sense to a character like a animal or a personality when I'm sparring, but more so that I'm just becoming so engaged in this particular feeling, that feeling now I carry it through the practice into the movements, and I find its quality, and I just investigate, and that is in a sense it's something that's happening, but it's a deliberate attention to a sensation, and that sensation then kind of goes throughout the whole practice, and I try to extend it as far as I can and carry it as much as I can. And that's why when you get beyond choreography, you can go to another level of practice because you're not fixated on remembering the movement. Now you can focus deeper on a feeling. But awareness of feeling is and then modulating the feeling, I guess, is kind of what I'm trying to say. It has a quality that it creates in your person, and if you can gradually over time just turn that on when you know that it's needed, it really can help kind of ground you in the moment, and if that's what the goal is, or in other sense, like, prepare you for sparring or whatever, or some activity. I had a great teacher who was a monkey stylist. He practiced many arts, but monkey was a particular, he would really literally just get into this playful monkey. He had where he just was silly, and then he would be like an aggressive monkey, but he could turn these on, and you could literally feel it in your own body. Like you could almost feel when he got into that mode, the effect that it had on you was interesting, because he would be playful and you'd feel his playfulness, but with the playful monkey, it's like this playfulness that is dangerous. It's kind of like he's playing, but he's going to do something pretty soon that's going to not be good for you. Or he'd get into this frantic monkey where, and you can actually feel his body chemistry change. And he looked as if he was in a state of frantic, of upsetness. And it's just interesting how we can actually create these states in our mind,
Right.
Positive or negative. And I think that's what habitual patterns are, is that we get into these patterns of habitually creating a particular type of energy in ourselves. And then we slowly feel this other ability develop, and then we learn how to expand those other intentions and modulate towards relaxation, towards calm, towards peaceful mind, and in a defined practice. And then we carry it into our everything that we're doing. And for those qualities that we want to carry into other things, maybe some quality is something that you like, you may carry the intent to another thing, to be very focused and very diligent and detail oriented to your business, but then in a conversation with somebody, that may not be the appropriate way. So you just allow everything to relax and flow, so they can just feel that they're totally being listened to and connected to, and there's no intention that you need to have them hurry up and organize their thoughts a particular way. And I think that's the goal, is to be able to create those for what they're to serve you when you need them.
Right. Yeah. And then so that's basically everything that you just said lends to this practice as well. We start developing it through deliberate modulation, which I would call emotional memory, things that we've done in the past. It kind of sets it up because we use imagination and things like that up to that point. And then sensing energy is our ability to pay attention to the infinite detail. Ito was really giving a great example of that. Practice that enough with a clear mind, everything is relaxed. And then before you know it, we can start to alter and shift our lens of perception at will. And like William said, it's not necessarily in one setting or another. We would be able to do that all throughout the day towards our desire, whenever we want, however we want. I'll flip it like a switch, just depending on the situation and what I need to shift my lens of perception to. All of that is under the assumption that the other aspects of the practice are in place, right? Because that's actually one of the final things I talk about, is shifting the lens of perception with just intention itself. Of course, when I say intention, attention at this point are already one and the same. They're at this point in the practice, towards the end, because we're talking about topic number 18 at this point, which we're supposed to be talking about topic number 5. So I'll backtrack it a little bit to topic number 5. But yeah, that all is kind of setting things up for, what this practice ultimately can deliver at a certain point, and, ways that we can translate what we're doing into our everyday life experience in some measurable ways, you know, at least measurable to ourselves, but very likely measurable to other people as well, especially when these things are in place. I don't think there's too many people that are around me on a constant basis that wouldn't say that they don't feel my peace. They feel it, you know, the calm attitude. You know, right now Bob's not in this group, but most recently he got, you know, a little bit of news and it kind of shook him a little bit, and you know, later he thanked me for being that patience, you know, that sense of calmness, and you know, everything isn't necessarily going our way, but let's just work with what we've got and let's keep swimming and come up with some good ideas. And ultimately this is the sixth core of this practice, which is adaptation. I think Ida was also giving a really good example of adaptation when she was talking about her example in the car. A balanced emotional state is very similar to a calm attitude, but it's emotional intelligence. We're aware of our emotions. We know what our emotions are doing. I think the biggest distinction that I would make is that sometimes we'll have an emotional reaction, and let's say it's to loss. That emotional reaction can be perfectly appropriate for the scenario, for the setting, but it's typically the thought that will take it from an appropriate emotional state to a very inappropriate emotional state. We'll take something from maybe we're a little bit irritated to just full-blown anger and rage because of the way that we were thinking, and then the habit of basically, in a way, habitually shifting our lens of perception to red anger. You know, somebody says, all I saw was black, you know, all I saw was red, because their vision literally changed because they were in such an emotional state, and they didn't do that on purpose though. So that's not at all what we're talking about with shifting the lens of perception. But the lens of perception does shift. So we can see that in people. We've probably felt that in ourselves. And it didn't require words. It was a habit. And it required momentum and time. So very similar thing. It's just, you know, we're doing it on purpose and in a way that will benefit us and everybody around us. And then impeccable self-awareness. This is our emotional intelligence, our awareness of our emotions, our awareness of our thoughts, our awareness of our actions, and eventually our awareness of our lens of perception and everything that's going in and out. Input, output, we are highly cognizant of everything that's occurring. So very rarely would somebody be able to tell me about my emotional state and I not already know. I just don't see that at this point, that I wouldn't be aware of my own emotional state, my own behavior that's occurring. This is the cognitive attention, behavioral attention. This becomes an intrinsic part of this practice. And then the kind heart, you know, that's just a nice way to say that if the mind isn't dysfunctional, we'll start to act in a more functional way for our species. And really, there is never a reason to be unkind to somebody. You know, it's a form of dysfunction when we start to be unkind to one another in our own species. Some people will say, well, I'm unkind to people who are unkind to me. But if we go back to the kernel of original unkindness, it's a form of dysfunction. It's a form of dysfunctional thought processes and habit that can alter the lens of perception. And it's all wildly dysfunctional and unbeneficial. So if I back this all the way up, though, because we really need to get into topic 5, because we're exactly 1 hour in and I haven't even mentioned today's topic. But so today we're talking about the voice of power. One thing I would say when I start to talk about things of power, I don't mean that in terms of power over anything necessarily. So it's not like we're controlling something or we're manipulating something or we have power over another person. Sometimes when you look up the word discipline, for example, it is often used as like forcing somebody into a type of behavior, even sometimes forcing ourselves into a type of behavior or a type of output. So when I use the word power, what I'm talking about is we have added our intentional attention to whatever it is. So the moment that I am aware in my dreams, I have attention and intention, I now have dreams of power. Does that make sense? And so now I'm talking about the internal self-talk. The moment that internal self-talk has attention and intention, it can start to become a voice of power. Does that make sense? And in the practice, so the EGOM will take everything that we're talking about and it will put it into technique. Today, you're going to write down in your note card this, paragraph that you're going to come up with. You're going to put it in a note card. You're going to carry that note card with you all day, and you're going to check into it as many times as you can. And when you're done with the end of the day, you're going to journal how things went, and you're going to answer this question and submit it to me. That's what a practice looks like. And you can take the bridge and create your own practice. And I would be happy to bounce ideas and say whether we're in principle or out of principle. But I really like William Miller saying with Qigong that it's not Burger King. You can't have it your way. You can have it your way and this way, but the way that I'm setting up this practice is for a very specific result to get to the end of this practice. And being able to deliberately intend, clear, and modulate our lens of perception, because I think doing that makes us immeasurably adaptable, psychologically adaptable, physically adaptable. So if we're in all of a sudden an emergency, maybe, I don't know, what are the things that can send a town or a city or a state into a heightened emergency? The ability to flip a switch and just completely, and Donna will probably have memory of this with being a nurse. You're able to just flip a switch. You're able to just put yourself into a mood where you're not really thinking about it. You're not using technique to get there. Because you're used to it. It's not her first day on the job. It's not William's first day practicing martial arts. So it's not like, he's practiced, she's practiced. And now we can just flip our switch to what we need to flip it to. So if there were an emergency, if there was a zombie apocalypse all of a sudden, somebody who's doing this practice and is able to alter their lens of perception would be able to instantly modulate themselves to the most beneficial state in order to adapt to the incoming stimuli, both psychologically and physically. So ultimately, the adaptation is directly proportional to the evolution of the human species, both psychologically and physically. So the voice of power, at the beginning of the practice, it looks a lot like mantras. It looks a lot like maybe what we call telling ourselves true things. I always put the word true in air quotes, though, because that's not a word I prefer to use. But the bottom line is it's the voice of logic. And that's kind of, I was working with somebody one-on-one, and they're like, well, I've been thinking positive, and I've just been, taking things from the internet and, things that sound good, and I've been saying them to myself, but it's not working, Ernest. And I'm like, that's because you don't believe it. You're sitting here telling yourself that everything's working out for you, but somebody's punching you in the face. It's not working out for you. Your passivity is getting you punched in the face, and getting punched in the face is never working out for us. That's not a desired result. That's injurious to the individual, and your brain doesn't like that. It wants to keep you safe. So getting punched in the face, you can't just sit here and say everything is working out for me. It's not. You're getting punched in the face. So sometimes positive thinking can get a little bit toxic because it's not something we believe. It's not something that we're really feeling. We're just trying to use force and control and take us from one state of emotional being to a different state that we view as better. Again, I don't want to say that you should never do that, or that a person will find no benefit in positive thinking, because it's about balance. Positive thinking can be beneficial, especially in the beginning. But as we go along, I don't really look at things in terms of positive, negative. We look at it as functional and dysfunctional. Is this functional for my situation? Is this helpful for me and other people? So the voice of power in the beginning kind of starts out with mantras. It will start out with maybe quotes that you like, that you believe, and that you find inspiring. But then eventually it can become a voice of logic. So if you're sitting here telling yourself that you're not good enough and you recognize it, the logical thing is that this isn't helping me. This is repetitive. This is habitual. This is not making me feel well. And logically, there is no reason for me to continue to think these thoughts. One of the reasons in Star Trek that all of the Vulcans, yeah, it's been a while since I've watched Star Trek, I guess, but all of the Vulcans, they have no emotion. Of course, they went to a completely opposite extreme, but it's because they use so much logic. And in our mind and the way that we interact with our own cognition, logic will cut through emotion. It's a way. Now, we don't want to just rely on logic either, because then we end up we don't have a lot of emotion. We can't express ourselves. So once again, we're just looking for balance. We're not looking for complete logic or just totally emotional, because typically they just end up all over the place. We're looking for a nice balance. We can use our logic to help balance our emotion, and we can use our emotion and how we feel to help balance our logical thinking. They can work together in a functional way. That's what balance is all about. And that's one of the unique aspects of this practice. I don't think anything is just going to one extreme, expecting the other extreme to be better. We find balance in almost everything, including the voice of power, including thought. So some ways that we can utilize our voice of power with intention and attention is even substitute dialogue. Substitute dialogue is maybe you go and you listen to Alan Watts. Maybe you go and you rewatch a video. That's going to be a form of substitute dialogue. You're substituting your own thought with somebody else's words. And if you're really listening and paying attention, you can't think your own thoughts and really pay attention to another person's words at the same time. That's the same direction of attention, and we can't really split ourselves in the same one direction. That's why the directions of attention are the directions of attention, because we can do those simultaneously. But it's very difficult to use defocused vision while also simultaneously paying attention to the infinitesimal detail right in front of you. You can abstractly be aware of it, which is cognition at that point, and peripheral vision. Right? So the voice of power, the way that I use it, and if you've read my book, of course, it has stages. It kind of moves along, and then eventually, when the mind is more relaxed, when we start to look at those 5 things I listed, when those 5 things are more in place, all of a sudden the voice of power can start to become a little bit more intuitive. The intuitive voice is intelligence in interacting with our mind. And it will almost always occur first as a feeling, and then our mind will go into a type of organization. And typically the way that our mind organizes things is with words. It's with dialogue. I don't declare war on that. Just like Donna said, though, I still have to have balance. I can't go around all day thinking about organizing my practices. When it occurs, I write it down, and then I move on, and I deliberately modulate, and I go back to my practice. The moment I wake up, I deliberately modulate, in fact. Yes, William, question.
I'm sorry. You said intuitive voice is the intelligence, and something about you were distinguishing intuitive voice being intelligence, and I guess connecting with it wasn't emotion. It was something else you said.
Our cognition. Yeah. So it's one of the previous of these 20 topics was the difference between knowledge, intelligence, and wisdom. Mm-hmm. So knowledge has 3 parts: information, personal experience, and the experience of other people. Knowledge is communicable. We can communicate it to other people. We can write it down. We can share our knowledge, and knowledge can increase as we gain more experience, as we gain more information, and as we take on more stories from other people that add to our totality of knowledge. And when we remember our knowledge and we apply it, I view that as wisdom. Then there's a reason I use these 2 words differently, because wisdom is not communicatable. I can't really give you my wisdom. The best I can do is tell you what I did, and then that's just an example. That's one of the 3 parts of knowledge now. But I can't give Donna my wisdom. Donna can't give me her wisdom. We don't share wisdom. Wisdom is an expression of knowledge. Intelligence comes from the fabric of the cosmos. This is why brain cells in a petri dish will start to organize itself. It's the reason that the first single-celled organism started to move and become more complex. It's the reason that stars become spheres and they become these complex things and cycles, and the universe is highly geometrical. I would say the Tao, the way the universe moves, is highly geometrical. It moves in patterns and shapes and things like that. Still has a little bit of randomality because the universe has that balance to it as well. But when the intuitive voice, that's more intelligence. So you may not have the information or the knowledge of why you shouldn't walk down that alley, or why you don't want to get on that plane, or why you're a little suspicious of this person. You don't have any information. You don't have any personal experience necessarily with this person. Nobody has shared their experience with you, but you get that feeling, it starts to tingle up your spine. And that's what I look at as the intelligence of the world around us, the fabric of the cosmos. Well, we're a part of the fabric of the cosmos. So ultimately that intelligence is in us as well. We don't have to have the mind go into thought, but that's how we organize things. So that's very likely going to occur. But that feeling of not going down the alley began with a shiver up the spine. And it's like, well, wait a second. Or when you're talking to somebody and it just feels like they have this agenda. Maybe it just feels like they're trying to take you hand in hand down their path of cognition, maybe to manipulate you or try to get you separated from your coin or something like that. Now that intelligence starts to come up and you can feel that as a feeling, and then your voice of power will very likely want to organize that and say, hey, Ernest, let's just not go down the alley. You may be wrong, but you also may be right. Let's just take the long way tonight. And then that would be the voice of intelligence. And you can apply that unto wisdom. So we can actually bypass knowledge sometimes and apply intelligence unto wisdom. Just like if I were to give Donna a puzzle that she's never seen before, she has no knowledge of it, but yet she's still able to solve it. That was intelligence. And
I'm just trying to find a way to, the intuitive voice is the intelligence of the universe distilled through our, I just trying to find a way that I would write, because I think I got an idea of, and I'll ask another question. The intuitive voice is like you said, it's you picking up the information that that's in that kind of comes to you, and it could be based off, like you said, your own previous knowledge of other things, maybe not a thing related to that, but those things compute into wisdom because of your experiences and knowledge. So you might not have a piece of this, but I'm just trying to find a way to write that down. Intuitive voice is the intelligence. And I'm stuck. When I go back at this later, I want to look at this and be able to know intelligence. Yeah. I put the intelligence of the universe, but I don't know if that's really.
I think that's fine. I think universal intelligence, fundamental intelligence. Sometimes the universe is a replacement word for God, and I don't necessarily mean it that way. But the universe is fundamentally intelligent. We can see its intelligence in nature. Right. We can see its intelligence in how stars and planets and atoms and molecules coalesce and form. There's no real reason outside of, universal intelligence that brain cells would start to organize themselves without, well, why is it doing that? Why did the first single-celled organism start to move in the first place? Because intelligence moves towards the evolution of consciousness, the evolution of species, change over time. That seems to be the evolutionary direction.
But we're expressions of that, right? So we are. But we're different expressions of that. So I have with a far less comprehensive definition, I have a niece, one of Eugene's grandchildren, and she's just not 2 yet. And she's playing with the 4-year-old twins. She has an innate intelligence that she expresses in her physical being that they haven't developed yet. So on the charts, the 4-year-olds are acting like normal 4-year-olds in terms of their fine and gross motor coordination and things like that. They're normal kids. They fall within the normal range. The little one that's not yet 2 exceeds their intelligence in that aspect, in her body perception. When she learned to walk, she could dribble a soccer ball. She could kick it, just have the right timing to keep that ball kicked in front of her. She can run across the room and stop on a dime without falling over and, before she hits the glass slider. It's just beyond her years in terms of how we measure those things on the island of the practical. So there's multiple intelligences. There's ways in which the universe organizes itself. And if we are an expression of that, there are our expression of where we fall in the measurement of that can be very different. So certainly a practice, as both of you have described in martial arts or any kind of physical practice, can enhance your ability to do that. Even when you were talking about being a nurse and being able to switch it on, there's probably some innate intelligence of mind that comes into play, but there's also years of practice behind it. So those things come together. So the 3 parts of knowledge and and one of which is intelligence, how they operate together is what forms wisdom, right? So what you were just defining is the voice of power. So the voice of power is utilizing the logic of those 3 forms of knowledge to our cognition to adapt to the circumstances. Am I correct in what the voice of power is?
Yes. The only thing that I would differentiate, and this is going to be a big difference between the way that I talk and the way that the world talks, is that there is only one type of intelligence. There's only one intelligence. It's the fabric of the cosmos. It's universal intelligence. How it expresses itself can be a little bit different. Like you have a 4-year-old that I saw on, I think it might have been Lisa Lang's TV show, but basically he has, Mozart skill on the piano and he's never had a lesson. Nobody's ever taught him the piano. He can hear it and then he can imitate it. And now so there was a piano teacher who spent his own life savings to buy this young man or this young child a piano and is paying for lessons, because if he can learn formally, now he can communicate, and not that he needs it, because intelligently he's able to imitate it all. So that's kind of a natural thing that occurs. When we start talking later in the practice about deliberately changing your lens of perception, we can tap into those types of intelligences at will, the expressions of intelligence, but there's only one intelligence. Now, one thing that Donna kind of mentioned, and it's not like this all the time, especially in a mind that doesn't have the results of this practice, but I create a triangle, and this is just a way of talking about it. I use shapes and things like that to discuss things. But there's 3 points to this one. And in the center is a type of force. It's a type of feeling that I call personal power. And it's very intelligent. It's the feeling of knowing. It's the feeling of you, and it's not just confidence. Like confidence is good, but I'm talking about something a little bit more profound, perhaps, that I call personal power. Personal power is a process of intent and will, and it's also a part of this triangle as well. So in the minds of most people, this triangle is huge, and it's not equilateral. It doesn't have equal angles. It's not balanced. Knowledge, wisdom, and intelligence are as far apart from one another as you could possibly imagine in the minds of some people. And that's because of cognitive dysfunction. There's no voice of power. The voice is habitual. It is just running all the time. It has no volition. It has no, you're not adding intention, will, it's not on purpose. So most people, the thinking, they've even begun to identify with it. William mentioned that at the very beginning when we first started to get together, that sometimes people identify with their thoughts to the extent that we think that's what's necessary for everything. We have to think ourselves out of problems. We have to think ourselves into solutions. We have to think ourselves in and out of this and that and everything else, because we've started to identify with thought as who we are. That gets so imbalanced that it leads to the attachment of ego and an infinite amount of psychological suffering. And then we start to get into Buddha, and the attachment to self creates the suffering. Having the self in to begin with is almost unavoidable. So again, I don't go from one extreme to the other. I will never not have a self. As long as I'm in this body, I'll call it Ernest, and I'll have memories and likes and dislikes. I won't cling and attach to those things. The more that I practice and the more that I go along, I'll find more balance and freedom among them. But ultimately, the moment I draw a circle around this, the circle implies balance. Whoops. Let me fix the circle, because that's a crappy circle. I don't know why, but sometimes it interferes with, there we go. And let's just imagine that the circle's touching those points on the triangle. So when I put the circle, it means that there is no longer a discernible difference between the three. They are overlapping. Your intelligence and your knowledge and your wisdom are being simultaneously expressed. That's what this practice will do. This practice, using the voice of power, in the beginning, we use our voice of power to go back to our practice. We call that the rule of three, because a moment ago, before our rule of three, our internal self-talk went away from power. It didn't have volition or intention. It was just running. And, you know, some people will say, well, my thoughts are just happening. They just happen to me. To a certain extent, yes, but eventually all the thoughts that we think can be a voice of power. Does that make sense?
So the voice of power is the cognitive expression of personal power.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. It is the cognitive expression of that personal power. And the interesting thing about this circle that I make is, you see the little dot in the middle, that's personal power. The moment that these three become balanced, that personal power circle becomes bigger. It becomes the circle. And we are personal power at that point. And there's literally no limit to what a human being can do at that point.
Is that when you hear yourself saying something and you think, where did that come from?
If you hear yourself saying something and where did that come from, the
Well,
voice.
it's good. It's a good an authentic voice that comes from your inner being, that wasn't planned, but is the right thing to say at the right time.
Sure.
That kind of
Oh,
feeling.
wow. Look at that. Look
Yeah.
at that thought that just went through my mind. Was that an inspirational thought, or was that a result of habit, momentum, or yeah, that's the voice of power. It's you hammering it out. I hate to say hammering it out. That sounds too much like work. It's you refining. Like Ernest said in the beginning, it's the voice of power is really just logic. We're logically talking out our practice,
Well,
reminding us to go back to the practice, and then eventually it becomes a more intuitive thing.
mhm.
So yeah, I think that's a step on the path, Ida. Yeah.
The voice of power will have different voices, and this is something I bring out in my book. So Ida, if we have a thought go through our mind and you're aware of it, that's because you're practicing. That's called cognitive attention training. You are cognitively aware of every single thought that's coming in and then going out. Does that make sense? That's a part of our practice. The more you're practicing, the more you're going to feel the feeling before the thought, and that's a key indication of where it's coming from. Does that make sense? Now, what will come from this personal power, the more that circle is expanded, the thoughts that come from our mind will be a reflection of that. So soon you'll have the intuitive voice. You'll have the clever voice. You'll have the wise voice. You'll have all of these different voices that are very helpful to you in the moment. They're coming from that place of peace. But because you're aware of it, and your awareness of it gives it power. What gives it power? Attention. Attention is what gives the voice power. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So when a thought comes up and you're aware of it, you're automatically giving it power because you're aware of it. Your attention is on it. You see it. You're privy to it. And then if you can kind of feel where that thought just came from and it's not necessarily functional or inspiring, well, now you know that you can redirect it. You can just let it go into the ether. You don't have to identify with it. You don't have to control it. You don't have to label it, judge it, compare it, contrast it. You just instantly can feel that it's not a beneficial thought for the circumstances or what you're doing. Or maybe it was a beneficial thought, but it's happening too much. And now you're getting out of balance and you're losing the quality of attention, and it starts to get habitual again. It's no longer a voice of power. So if I say voice of power, that means that there is attention, and hopefully eventually, because we're practicing, there will be intention and attention overlapping. Does that make sense?
Yes, and there's a space before it comes out of your mouth.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
You can give yourself the space to where you're not, just because most people, they say think before you talk, is because there's no delay. They're just, everything that they're thinking, they're just spewing out of their mouth. I actually don't mind that, because that really tells me a little bit about you. I get to learn a little bit.
I just had a visual of attention and intention being like the electrons around the atom in your diagram. So the triangles in the middle and the other triangles upside down, and the circle around it is actually attention and intention in perfect balance of each other.
Right. And then I'll answer William's question here real quick, but let me first map out. Let me take off this circle. Otherwise, when I save it, it doesn't look like anything. We have one other triangle that we use, and it goes with what we're talking about with the voice of power. And I can show you a diagram where these two overlap. And then before you know it, your intelligence and your desire are working together. In a lens of perception that's cloudy and muddy, your desire is not necessarily being influenced by intelligence, because that intelligence triangle is so big and misshaped that they're not really overlapping. So again, for the common person, they can have a desire, but no intention to do anything about that desire. Maybe their desire is to lose weight, but they didn't really intend anything, so they don't lose weight. For whatever reason, I'm not saying we need to lose weight or anything like that. Just maybe that's their desire. Maybe that desire isn't in alignment with intelligence, because maybe the goal is to never lose weight. The goal is to just be more healthy. And if you do lose weight, then that's what your body needed, right? The body has its own intelligence. We don't have to try to heal. We just need to get out of our own way, and the body will begin to heal itself. That's more of a traditional Chinese medicine outlook, as opposed to the Western outlook that we need a 1-to-1 ratio. So again, I'll put a circle around this. And when I put a circle around the triangle, that means that there is no discernible difference between these three. And that's a person who has a lot of personal power. They have the desire, they have the intention to fulfill that desire, and then they have the power of will to complete their intention. So somebody can have the desire to lose weight, but they don't have the intention. Also, a person can have the desire to lose weight. They can intend to lose weight. As of January 1st, I start going to the gym, but then they didn't have the power of will to actually do it, because there was no personal power in this equation. because in this example, there would be no circle around it, and the triangle would be all malformed and far away from each other. So for some people, intention and will are miles and miles apart. And that's a person that's just not getting a lot of shit done. It's just, it is what it's an energetic thing. It's not that they're lazy necessarily, but they don't have a lot of personal power because there's not a lot of intention and will occurring. And when there's a circle around it, though, there is no discernible difference between, and that's why I'll just use the word personal power, because now there's no difference between one's desire, one's intention, and one's will. That overlaps and they start to express themselves simultaneously and in some cases instantly. Does that make sense? And then when we combine these two triangles, now we're really talking. We really get somewhere with these two overlapped, because when they're overlapped, I have them situated that they start to communicate with one another, such as intelligence starts to communicate to desire. And rather, so when someone says, yeah, so it's that one. And I'll show another picture of it. Yeah. Yep. That looks good. Intention and wisdom can start to overlap. Will and knowledge can start to overlap. Intention and desire can start to overlap. And then before you know it, your desires are far more functional. Like there's a lot of people, if I said, well, why do you desire those designer jeans? Oh, I just like them. Really? So if I showed you another pair of pants that were $5 from the thrift shop, will you like them as much? Even though it doesn't have that label, doesn't have that logo.
Maybe if you didn't tell them it was $5 pants from the gift shop.
Right. They might like it then. But so is that desire really intelligent? I think that's questionable at that point if we're just branded and we're just buying. Now, some brands you associate with quality. That's not what I'm talking about. But some people, it's a brand because it's how will other people view me? How will other people look at how, it's usually a part of a complex mating ritual because biology is their destroyer. So it's like, I need to look a certain way. I need to act a certain way. I need to put on a certain, pretense. I need to put this on so that people will view me a certain, that's incredibly dysfunctional. There's no reason to do that. If we are who we are and intelligence and desire are overlapping, we'll want to be more healthy. We'll want to be more kind, and that kind-heartedness will start to come out. Does that make sense?
I have a question. It may not be appropriate for now, and you can say we'll talk about that later.
Okay.
But can you explain how hunting power fits in
Yeah.
with the voice of power?
Well, hunting power at a certain point, you would only use the voice of power to remind yourself of a certain dynamic. So when we get into hunting power, so I can kind of show you this now. Hydrostasy has 3 parts. I don't know why it does that. When I press certain letters, it stops. Hydrostasy. I was going to say, this is my own word, so I should be able to spell that correctly. Hydrostasy has 3 parts. When I use the word seeing, I don't mean that in a super mystical way. I'm really just talking about our lens of perception, and these triangles and stuff are starting to overlap. So we're able to see things more clearly. We're able to see our own behavior. Where is our behavior coming from? We don't necessarily need a therapist, although, again, nothing wrong with therapy and therapists. But with this dynamic, we start to see it ourselves. So I would call this the act of seeing. So that would be the first part of hydrostasy. The next part of hydrostasy I call hunting power. The reason I call it hunting is because there's a lot of stalking involved, stalking oneself. You see yourself, you're able to see your own habits, your own patterns. You're able to really invoke intention and will. And yes, the voice of power will be included because you can use your voice to remind yourself of your desire, that will remind yourself of your intention and remind yourself that you have this power of will. So you're about to approach that third piece of cake and you're like, wait, no, hold on. I'm going to use my voice of power to remind myself that I desire a healthy body. That's my desire. And I intend to do that by doing something else other than eating this piece of cake. And then the power of will is when we go back to our practice and we redirect, and maybe we use a voice of logic. Cake isn't the problem. Sugar isn't the problem. I just want balance. I'll have another piece of cake again in my life. That's okay. I'm not going to go from one extreme to the other. But right now, my desire is balance. So when we start to get into hunting power is the behavioral change aspect of this practice. And one of the ways that we do that is by invoking the voice of power. Absolutely. Yeah. That did skip
And
ahead.
you mentioned one time before, it always stuck in my mind, that you couldn't get into hunting power until you stopped leaking power.
Well, you can't get into hunting power until you have set up. So yes, Ida, absolutely. I would never, ever, under any circumstances, deliver hunting power while someone's still leaking power, because it will turn into a psychological roadblock. They'll start beating themselves up. They'll start comparing and contrasting. And the leaking power, the judgment voice, most people are judging themselves. That's why I don't get into the multiplicity of self. There's not a higher Ernest and a lower Ernest and a shadow Ernest and a no, I am the totality of my understanding, my whole life. It's all happening now. And it's all either moving towards inspiration and adaptability, or it's moving away from inspiration and adaptability. If it's moving away, I will eventually decay. I will break down. I will get stagnant and I will die. If I'm going towards adaptability, I will be able to change with change. I will become more vibrant, and ultimately I will be more healthy. Does that make sense, Ida? So, but I won't deliver the hunting power with anybody until our lens of perception is a little bit more clear and we are in the act of seeing. Because hunting power can become a huge source of force trying to control and manipulate if a person were to start there. And sometimes people do start there, and I'm not going to say that they should or they shouldn't. Some people want to use force and their own personal power, their own energy to find discipline or to find behavioral change. And I'm not going to tell a person they shouldn't do that. That's their way, that's their approach, and I wish them the best. And I'm not going to say it's better or worse necessarily. This system is different. This system doesn't approach deliberate behavioral change until the very end. Because
but it will eventually become an extreme and then be out of balance and lead to decay. So
what will?
Hunting power.
Not in the way that we're doing it. No.
No.
Yeah.
No, in the way that you say good luck to them.
Oh,
like
yeah,
when somebody does that, they can see that it works. I mean, look at Donald Trump. You can see that it works. It can work. It depends on what your definition of work
is. Yeah. And you can be,
what your definition of success is. It's not balanced if that is your primary means of navigation is by hunting power, then it becomes a grossly imbalanced.
and hunting.
I just remember being very excited hearing about hunting power, because obviously in the past I have done that and done that to extremes, and because of not knowing about leaking power, I fell down spectacularly quite often in my life, because I hunted power, I got a result, but I could never hold on to the result. It didn't stay because the balance wasn't there, because it was leaking power, and then I went back to the other extreme and up to the heights, down to the depths, but there was no equalizer. There was nothing in the middle to keep me stable. So I sensed very much that when you talked about hunting power and I got excited about it, I need to be careful with this, because I'm not ready to hunt power until I have plugged up the gap here in some way,
See, that's the thing. The reason I use hunting is because you're stalking. So how do you hunt game in the wild? You have to be patient. You have to be calm. You have to be relaxed. You have to be wildly observant to learn the patterns of your prey. And then when you learn the patterns of the prey, you can just get ahead of them, and you can, I guess, in the example of hunting, the physical hunting, you kill your animal. So again, that's not plus or minus. I don't look at hunting as good or bad, or I think it can be dysfunctional if you're just doing it for fun and stuff like that. Like, that's really weird. Killing something for fun, I think, is wildly dysfunctional. But if you're, killing a buffalo and you're going to use absolutely every part of that buffalo and you feed your entire tribe for a year because of that one buffalo, I think that there's a respectful way to hunt. It comes down to intent, basically. But I don't want to use the term hunting power for what you were doing, Ida, because you could just say that what you were doing before was trying to force behavioral change. And that's not hunting power. Hunting power is only a thing that we're able to do when, number one, we have a voice of power, and number two, we're able to stalk. How can you stalk if you're not cognitively aware, behaviorally aware, sensory aware? You have to be highly aware of everything, and that is this practice. So if we're not doing all of that, then we're not stalking, we're not hunting, we're not setting up intention and will just for the sake of intention and will. Not because you want a big result, not because you want to be successful, not because you want to now all of that can occur. You can end up with a Fortune 100 company through your hunting power. But the only reason we hunt power is for more personal power through intention and will. So you're just doing it to do it because you can. That is a lot of the karma yoga, the service. You're doing just for the sake of doing because you can create and have fun and enjoy what you're doing, but not because you think you need to get glutes of steel so that women will, turn their heads at you, that type of thing. So the other prerequisite for this are these characteristics. I would never, ever, under any circumstances, deliver hunting power to a mind that doesn't have these in place, or at least moderately, like we're going towards that. Otherwise,
what's the third aspect of hydrostasy?
Oh, well, that's not really relative to the topic. But the third aspect of hydrostasy, let me find my pencil. Abstract principles. What I call the abstract principles are principles to help you stay where you are and to help you. The reason I call that final thing, ignition, illumination, whatever, it's really spirit. It's the spirit inside and the spirit outside. We're able to feel it, we're able to see it, we're able to move with it. And you don't really do anything with it necessarily. So it's not like you're going to start setting shit on fire with your chi and your shen and all of that. I think that's, again, where's the intelligence and the desire here? Like, why are we setting things on fire for the show? It's like, because you're showing off, you're inflating your sense of self. It's ego. That's not what we're talking about. But ultimately, we get to this point that I call ignition. And it is a point where you feel spirit inside and outside and everything. And that's a tunnel. It's not a door. We don't walk through it. We continue to walk through that tunnel. And what you create, how you develop things, will be directly proportional to your temperament, to your likes, to your dislikes. So when William Miller travels through that tunnel and he's creating things and he's staying inside that shimmer, inside of that illumination, what he creates will be very different than what Donna creates. We're different people. We have different interests so far. And I look at an enlightened or a society that doesn't create cognitive dysfunction in the first place. And they have so many different creative pursuits, so many different types of personalities, so diverse in who we are and how we express ourselves. And that's all okay. It's up to the individual's temperament and how they express themselves. But for example, when Donna feels that spark and her body becomes alive, the outside world becomes alive, it illuminates, you feel it. I mean, ultimately, it's not a thought; it's a feeling. But you can see it in a manner of speaking. That's why I use the word "seeing" in air quotes. But you can see it. You can see that's why I believe that all the ancients from antiquity came to similar conclusions that we're all one, man, because they felt it, right? They didn't have the technology and the understanding that we have now. Why would they ever come to the conclusion they still thought that the stars were traveling around the earth, because from our perspective, that's what it looks like, right? There's no reason to believe that the earth is the one that's spinning and that the stars are fixed in the sky. There's no reason to believe that, but yet they still came to the conclusion that we're all one because they felt it. For whatever reason, they came to this place where that could be felt. So one of the abstract principles is to do everything in your life from that place. That's a principle. That's one of the first abstract principles. Does that make sense? So when you feel that illumination, when you walk to the store, do it from that place. When you train martial art, do it from that place. When you are creating a new painting, do it from that place. When you're doing acupuncture on somebody, do it from that place. You're not just creating an effect to walk away and to find another effect. There is no other effect. We're walking through an illuminated universe. And so I do have other abstract principles, but the abstract principles are to help maintain walking through that illumination and personal power and everything else that we're talking about. You will maintain these 5 aspects of the practice. There's more, but there's only 5 that I'm willing to guarantee right now. For a healthy body, I can't guarantee that. If Donna just sits around all day, doesn't do a damn thing with herself physically, I can't guarantee a healthy body. I'm not going to guarantee things that I'm not 100% sure that this practice will bring out. Now, I do believe that when you're in this illuminated effect and your desire and your intelligence are overlapping, we'd be like, hey, wait a second, the sitting isn't feeling very good. I need to move. I need to get up. That would be intelligence. And you're just doing it intelligently because you know that you feel that you need to. So I do believe that a person would ultimately be more healthy. I'm not prepared to guarantee that yet. Not without, you need other things. You need the movement and you can create it on your own, or you can do something that I recommend, such as Qigong or Tai Chi or Yin Yoga. I can't offer stuff I don't do. I'm not that kind of teacher. If I offer something, it's because I myself do it. Okay, Ida, see you later. We're almost done here. So there shouldn't be too much to rewatch. Yes, William.
Yeah, I just, 2 things I wanted to see that on hydrostasy, the act of seeing, and the other arrows were pointing some things. I didn't get a chance to write those down, but then I want to kind of revisit the conversation about will, about desire and intelligence, and I'm not to. I think this is maybe for me. I can see in some of my areas of life where that's a sticking point. You use the example of the genes and how you can have this $5 gene versus this name brand gene, and the $5 gene may fit better. It may feel more comfortable, but you have all of these things that have been accumulated over time that lack intelligence in relationship to you. So you may know that the $5 gene actually is very comfortable to you, feels good, it's everything, right? But you still judge it according to the perceptions, beliefs, identities that you've picked up over time that don't seem to make you feel, don't show your intelligence. You realize that, damn, this is like, I am retarded here. It's like I can't connect what I know is intelligent to my desire. And so you can have the intention to have something, an experience, but your desire and your intelligence are off. So you your intention, you may have the logical intention, but because of your desire and your intelligence, whatever will you're trying to maintain towards managing creating this intention that you have, or but so that's just an interesting part. I don't want to belabor that with a whole bunch of words. I know you know exactly what I'm saying. Yep. The question though is to me, then you can't force the matter. But in some areas there's a certain amount of time you have to get those things in alignment for you to I mean, maybe there's unlimited time potentially. Like there's no rush, but the reality is you may miss out on certain aspects
Mhm,
of an experience because you can't get those two in alignment in the right amount of time.
mhm.
And it can be very troubling because you know what is your intelligence is saying one thing, your desire is saying things, but the desire you possibly know that that's not really yours. Like the desire for this particular gene, but the $5 gene is perfect. So I don't, it's a question like, what do you do with that?
Right.
In
Okay.
this whole practice, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So one of the things that Donna gave the example of was Donald Trump, and bless his heart, I'm sure somebody out there just loves Donald Trump and thinks he's a nice guy. So I'm not necessarily disagreeing with that per se, but uh, what he had the example of, or what a lot of people have the example of, is they're able to create the conditions in just very small aspects of their lives. They have accumulated intention and will in certain aspects. So I'm going to write on this side towards, and on this side, I'm going to write away. So ultimately, this shape of intelligence and desire, and remember, when I put a circle around it, just assume that they're overlapping. It's
Right, yeah.
I can't really draw that, on the whiteboard. Otherwise, it's just a black circle, or a white circle. And but this, when I put a circle around it, that implies that there's balance between these things. And there's no discernible difference now between our desire and our intelligence. They will overlap. Like there's a lot of animals where there's no discernible difference between their desire and their intelligence. They're overlapping. Now, what takes us away from that? We'll start with away. Now, you can do this dynamic in a small area, such as business, such as a sport, but you won't have it everywhere, right? You won't have it in life necessarily. You'll have it and then some people will still look and say, oh, but he's wildly successful. And then you'll be like, well, are you sure? Elon Musk, a lot of money, wildly successful with business, but I don't know if I want to trade my cognition for his. I don't think I'm prepared to trade minds. That's for sure. So what takes us away? Ultimately, what takes us away and what drives these factors apart from each other is the nemesis. A nemesis. The nemesis is a mind that is operating below the line of active recognition. And the nemesis is habit, the momentum of habit, not and no voice of power. There's no real voice of power occurring, because it's just the repetitive habitual stream of thought, and it's pretty much all day long. It is the interference factor. I don't prefer the words resistance and stuff like that. Those are law of attraction type words. I prefer interference. It's interfering with that flow. The reason I don't use those words is because we could use the words resistance differently. The way that I use the word resistance is to actively push against. I'm actively trying to push against and shove things away, and I'm using force to do that. That's resistance. Sometimes people use the word resistance as undesirable in your experience. And that's fine. I know what people are talking about when they say that, but that's not how I choose to use the words. So I just use them a little bit differently. So if your intention and your will are miles apart, if your desire and your intelligence is miles apart, it's because we're feeding the nemesis. We're feeding the 5 destroyers. We're feeding the enemies of knowledge. The first enemy of knowledge that I've shared so far is distraction. The mind is fundamentally distracted from what? The present moment and everything else that is available to us. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then what brings them together, though? So what brings these things towards one another is active attention. That deliberate nature of active attention, because when you're doing your practice, is that not intention and will? When you say that I'm going to place my mind on shadows today, you intended it. The reason that you're doing it is because you desire to do the practice. And then when you actually do it, you're doing intention and will. You're bringing in personal power into your experience by the very act of doing this practice. What is necessary for it to align and become, this overlapping thing of symmetry is consistency and continuity in the practice. Which will all equal momentum. You get more momentum by being consistent. And you can see this so what we're talking about is the embodiment factor though. And that's that's the defining characteristic between something being in just an aspect of life or being in every single nook and cranny of your existence is embodiment. Taking it with us all the time, doing it in everything builds more momentum, builds more continuity, builds more consistency, and it's all through active attention. And that will bring these things towards each other, closer together. And you can do that in a microcosmic example. So if you want to be good at chess, assuming that you're not a savant, which means that your intelligence is just immediately connecting to your wisdom, your output. Now, assuming that you're not a savant and you just have to kind of learn, well, the more you practice, the more continuity there is with your practice, the more momentum you gain, the more confidence you gain, the better you get, the better you perform, the more your intention and will are closer together, and your desire and your intelligence will be closer together. And then before you know it, you're about to buy a $160,000 Ferrari and you're like, wait a second, I don't drive. Like, this isn't a very intelligent purchase. There's a lot of people suffering in the world and I need a private jet. How is that intelligent? How is that the 3 W's? Intelligence is the 3 W's. W for me, W for the other person directly involved, and a W for the whole world. A private jet doesn't fit that description. It might be a W for me because I don't have to wait in lines. That's nice. I don't know if that's a W for the other people directly involved, and I doubt very seriously that that's a W for humanity as a whole, because it's wasting more fuel, or it's using more fuel. It's requiring more resources, and heaven forbid I start to really think heavily of myself. It could be inflating one's ego as well. So there's all kinds of things that we do in this world that intelligence and desire couldn't be more far apart. And it's because we're feeding the nemesis. You'll notice that the areas that desire and intelligence are the farthest apart involve biology, involve entertainment, and involve the other destroyers.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, what were you gonna say, Donna? Donna, you're still muted.
I was listening to this and looking at the illustration that you made, and thinking about William's question. So he's formulating an understanding of it in his mind, and what gives you an advantage, and Ernest as well, is your practice at martial arts, your practice at boxing. Because if he were describing all these principles at play and that diagram through the lens of Tai Chi, you'd see it perfectly, right? You'd say, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense, that makes sense. And the words would come and how it all comes together, and how each point on the triangles may move and you adapt, but maintain a balance of that circle spinning around the outside, and how you gain personal power from that practice. So you have an advantage of understanding how going back to your practice makes that diagram function in a balanced way, even though it's moving and changing as you navigate sparring or kata or whatever. But then you brought up the example of having a conversation with a friend about a personal situation in a relationship, and how you were observing their response and how you were observing your response to their response and all of that. And it becomes, you're trying to draw the parallels of this practice that Ernest has explained, the embodiment of this practice. So really that's and the $5 genes versus the Sassoon genes, and where do I fall, where do the destroyers come in my own navigation of that. I'm ready to defend that when I put on something of quality, I have some quality pieces from college, depending on if I can still fit in them, but I still have them, and my Old Navy stuff lasts a season maybe, or two at best. So I can argue all that, but really, what's my motivation? Where's the clarity? And the answer is always go back to the practice. Go back to the practice. Where's my mind? What am I doing with it? Am I absorbed in thought? And if it were in relation to somebody's coming at me to punch me, or I am moving my chi around, I observe the guy who's the different types of monkeys. It makes so much sense in that aspect because of the result of you practicing. Your practice has enabled you to sense energy, to see where intention and will come into place, how it's all balanced, and when it's all balanced, how that expresses itself with a high degree of personal power. But how do we translate that? I mean, that's the beauty of Ernest's bridge system, right? Is the deconstruction and the reconstruction of it in a daily practice. That's the whole point of when yogis say, bring your practice with you. Go to a yoga class and you have all of this stuff come together, or Tai Chi class or whatever. Well, bring your practice with you. Well, how? The bridge system is the how. And that diagram is just a great illustration of that. So I was just thinking of all those examples, the example of the monkey guy and your practice, and your geese. Was it geese? Your interaction with the geese.
A swan. It was a swan.
Swan. Sorry. I'm sorry. I have the same thing with the pigeons. But anyway, and the seagulls, the little rat birds. Same thing. So you got a swan, I get rat birds. Same thing. Principles still apply. But yes, the $5 genes versus all of the principles still apply to everything that you're talking about when we're looking at this diagram and hydrostasy and what parts are in play. And it's just the amount of practice. When you watch a production, a film production or a drama, the actors, some people are really skilled at their craft. They're good at imitation of a person who is, I think of Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford is really good at his craft. He can imitate the person who does it by watching their characteristics. But then there are other actors like a Sean Penn, or somebody who really dives into studying how a person balances some of their things that we're talking about, and how they carry that in their bodies, and they really can portray a character with such believability that they really assume the character because they're points of attention about how that person expresses their own combination of things. A lot of what we talk about is a more compelling. When they're being Sean Penn again, they're a completely different person than when they're being this character, and how much they populate their bubble of perception with all of those different things. So all the principles apply. I love the fact that this is a consistently applicable way to define and explain, and to go back to the practice, because the principles apply across the board in every example.
Mm-hmm. That's why they're principles. Yeah, a principle apply across the board.
Yep.
A really great way to look at this also is the opposite perspective. When we see how far intelligence and desire gets. So when we look at the way that we're behaving with entertainment, the need to be entertained, the way that we insist on entertaining ourselves in certain ways with alcohol and clubs and parties. And now, is there anything wrong with alcohol? Is there anything wrong with clubs? No, but it's the unconscious, incessant tendency to engage these things below the level of active recognition. And then so that's biology. Or no, when you look at biology, now you're getting into food and sex and how many habits have people created that are below the level of active recognition around the way that they eat, the way that they interact with the opposite sex or same sex or whatever they find attractive or whatever they desire, because it's the desire factor. The desire is not tied to intelligence. It's tied to habit. It's tied to the nemesis, and it's tied to the destroyers. Socially, people wanting to climb this ladder, and they want social success and adoration from other people, and they want to be influencers and all of these different things. Again, there's nothing wrong with necessarily influencing other people, but the desire is so far away from intelligence that it starts to break things down. It starts to break down the evolutionary factor, because when a person their desire is so far away from intelligence, they're not that adaptable. And then all of a sudden you get a stay-at-home order for a week or two, and they're flipping their shit because they can't go to their local bar and, live it up or whatever they're going to do. Right.
But I'm just talking about looking at myself. Like, wow, if you tell me that your loved one or one of my loved ones is dying, is in the active stage of dying, or at least nearing it, I can, if somebody asks, I can be inserted into that environment and I can see that all these principles at play in balance. It's just something that I'm really good at. And it comes from practice, but it also comes from some intelligence that I've always had. But in my nursing practice, there are windows of that's my place. You can, pick up William and put him in a class with a bunch of kids and who want to learn boxing, and he can just pick up all of these skills and balance and adapt it to this one individual and notice where they're leaking power and help guide them and influence them, and he can align himself so that he fills the room with that energy, which helps the person align with that more. Put me in a different circumstance, a circumstance where I have a lot of habit and momentum that don't serve me, or beliefs or whatever, and I don't function as well as I do with a person and their family at a dying person's bedside. I mean, extraordinary things happen in that place where I excel for lots of reasons, but those principles are all at play and very well balanced. Put me in another situation and I go, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, what am I doing? Listen to me. What am I so nervous about? Or what am I, like, look at my reaction. I can see it. I can feel the difference. So what gives me some ballast is knowing that I can see the principles at play and where I'm successful at it, and perhaps apply them. Maybe I have to go back to the beginning of the practice and talk it through. Maybe I need to listen to substitute dialogue. Maybe I need to talk my practice out loud in this setting, because I'm not as practiced in this setting, but I certainly have attained some wisdom and intelligence and knowledge in understanding the principles at play. I've lived long enough on the planet to be able to apply them to this situation. And if I can't, I have a practice now that I can go back to that quiets my mind so that those things become available to me, to make me more adaptable. I may be clunkier at it in other contexts, but I can feel it. I can feel myself being clunky, and I have a practice now to go back to, even if it's very beginning stages in some aspects of my life, as opposed to the ones that are well practiced in my life. And then we go back to deciding it in the beginning of the day, modulating it. That hydrostasy is something that you can carry across, and it's all telemarketers, that you can carry across, once you establish some hydrostasy practice, I find that I don't veer as far from my well-practiced practice to my clunkier practice. The extremes aren't as far. If I choose, it was what I fought in the beginning of the practice. I have to choose them the day before. I have to choose them before. I'll find them. I'm good at this. I know how to do this. I'll just pick them up when I need them. It's just hustling myself, the coasting, hustling myself. Like you want to be in practice? You want to be well practiced in your life? Practice.
And I think what you're saying is so powerful, Donna, because I think that's the challenge when you're very well practiced in one particular area, and then you realize that you have some, for lack of deficiencies in other areas. And the assumption would be, though, that for people who engage with you, they see your level of development, your emotional intelligence, and all these things, and these various factors. And but because you may have a challenge in another area, the assumption is that that you shouldn't, basically, that everything just translates. It just should cross over. Like if you're so emotionally aware and you have these levels of development here, that should just translate into all aspects of your experience. And then
sure, people say you're so smart. Why did you do such a stupid thing? You're so
right.
smart.
And then they may feel, and then it becomes a judgment because it may feel that you're not how to say this, that you're not authentic in this area. And that's not the right
You're
word,
not
but
practicing what you preach.
Yeah, you're not practicing what you preach, or if you're intentionally not doing it, like you're intentionally not bringing that energy to another place. It is not a question of you're not intentionally doing it, but there is some lack of ability of transfer. And it's like you said, like, Trump is an extreme example, and so it's kind of harder for me to when you use the example of Trump, it's kind of hard because he's so far extreme. It's just like I can't even. But I get what the point is, that people get extreme, and they may have this area that they develop themselves. And Ernest has said this many times, that you see people who are highly cultivated in some physical practice, and they don't seem to have that same balance, or whether it be business or finances or whatever, and they don't find those areas in other places. And I think the good side, though, is that when you have reached a level of cultivation in an area, it's to say that, just like you said, you can now extrapolate from that and use that in other areas, but you almost have to go back to being a beginner again. And what happens is that you've reached a certain level of cultivation in some areas, that it's through years and years of practice that it seems very natural to you. And this is something I've learned with my students, that sometimes I'll listen to them explain things and I realize, wow, he's explaining that actually better than I am now, because he's closer to that experience than I am now. I taught him all that, but now I can look back and say, wow, you're actually saying that more clear than I am at this point.
Value in the beginner mind. There's value in the
I'm so
beginner
engaged
mind.
that I can't, for some reason, I can't extrapolate that as well, because it's also integrated. It's just like, and I have to realize, well, I really have to go back to basics to help new students. And so sometimes I rely on new students. I'll like show him that, and I'll have explained it. But the new student, because they're kind of just still working on it, and they're only maybe a few months or a couple years ahead on that material, they're like, oh no, you got to really pivot. You got to, and they're bringing up things I said at a different point that they've now are embodying, and it's really fresh for them. And I think that that's the skill, that one is staying a beginner's mind, and then being able to transfer skills that you've developed in one area into another area. And it's just interesting. I mean, how that you can know these things, but not necessarily can just access them at all times.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think the value of understanding it, and the questions that we ask here, and Ernest's genius in deconstructing his practice to this point, and then being able to reconstruct it in a teachable fashion, is that it helps you to notice it in others. It's one of my strengths, and I think it came from my nursing practice, is that people who say they can't do stuff, like Ida was saying earlier, I could never say that the way you said it. I feel what you're feeling and I identify with your feeling, but I could never articulate that. And then later in the class, she articulated something beautifully. So, you know, it helps you when you notice it in yourself. It helps you, like you just explained, to notice it in another. Somebody who's in the beginning of the practice can explain some basic principle better than you can, because you've assimilated it and you've forgotten that those were the basics in the beginning. And that is when you see somebody who can do something when they are feeling doubt or the inability to do it, or something is unattainable, to be able to recognize in them, no, I've seen you do this in this search. I saw you take care of your mother. I know that you can do this. I know you can do this principle, that you've exercised it, that you've exercised wisdom, that you have patience, I watched you do it in this aspect. So, you know, you do have the skills, you do have the ability, you do have the capacity. Maybe you're not practiced at this in your marriage as you were as a whatever aspect when you can notice it in somebody or in yourself. I notice it, my level of excellence in certain areas and the degree of clunkiness I have in others. But why not? I have to go back to the practice. That's why I love that we started from the beginning here, because there's always value. I'm taking a Tai Chi class now that's so basic and fundamental and rudimentary, and it's with elderly people. It's at the senior center, and they're limited. They do a lot of the exercises in the chair, but there's still such value in the beginner mind. There's such value in that, because it really helps you understand the principles to a deeper level, and makes them more accessible to apply them in clunky areas of my life. Notice when I'm being pulled from my practice. You know, I feel it sooner. I notice it sooner. I don't like the way it feels, and then I go, oh, where's your mind? What are you doing? And then I'm back in. So yeah, beginner mind is great.
A question, Ernest, you mentioned biology, entertainment. Was there something else that you were talking about in that area in relationship to you know, things that bring you kind of, that you feed, part of the nemesis conversation, but it was biology, entertainment, and I think you might have said
You were
something
doing
about
toward and away. You were
Yeah.
doing the toward and away, which
Well,
is
I think what
the
William wants to know
destroyers.
is the destroyers. So the 5 destroyers, the first one, so we said biology, entertainment, society, our social, socioeconomic situations, and then the habits that we've created already. And then the momentum of humanity is the 5th destroyer. The momentum of the human species itself, as a group, thinking is way out of balance, and that has so much momentum that it's literally destroying ourselves and our planet. That's how
biology, entertainment, society is socioeconomic.
it could be. You could include economic, but because that's a part of your social bubble.
Construct.
Yeah, your social construct. So the bottom line is that these things are not enemies unto themselves. There's nothing wrong with entertainment. There's nothing wrong with your biology. But what happens is that we feed the nemesis. We are acting below the level of conscious recognition. And when that happens, we are influenced by these factors to the nth degree. So because we're operating below the level of conscious recognition, we're in habit, we're more easily influenced by entertainment factors. We're more easily influenced by our own biology. And before you know it, we're just basically acting like animals, you know, just basic animals, because we're not interjecting anything above the level of active recognition. Does that make sense?
Okay, yeah, it does, totally. 1 is biology, 2 is entertainment, 3 is society slash in a bubble. I mean, society slash in a bubble, socioeconomic construct. 1, 2, 3. Habits we have created is 4, and 5 would be basically the direction that humanity is moving, almost like a collective energy, a collective consciousness force.
Exactly. The Exactly. The collective essence, the collective energy has become so strong that it's like a force unto itself. It's a force we've created, granted, but and then we never directly attack these destroyers. We don't actually want to directly interact with them. All we need to do is not feed the nemesis. What's really interesting is, based on what you just said, is that somebody who can alter their lens of perception at will, whether it's in it's usually in a microcosmic example, like when they step up to something that they're really good at, they can actually affect another person's lens of perception directly as well. So have you ever had somebody look at you in such a way that it's like, oh shit, like, I don't know what to do right now. Like, maybe especially like in a combat sense, like they're so focused and you see their personal power and what they're about to do to you. And you're like a deer in headlights. You're like, oh shit.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely experienced it, but it's interesting when you experience it in other places. That's a very common one for me.
That's a common one, yeah.
But it's interesting, and it's something that I would imagine that you and Donna and myself, I do as well, is that when you're so clear in your expression and you're so aware, it has that it has that same effect on people when they realize, okay, I have to be very thoughtful about how I say what I'm about to say next. I have to, because I'm talking to someone who is, their clarity is so clear that my unclarity will be exposed. And regardless if I don't want to be exposed or not, I'm exposed in myself, meaning I see it in myself, regardless of whatever their judgment is, whatever. I don't even worry about that, like in a combat situation. But it's just like you realize, oh, this person is there. And I find this, and going back to just like saying engagement, I think that I don't mean to sound I just say it. I think that sometimes when you talk with women, women have a much more emotional clarity, and they have an emotional power that when they express themselves around their feelings and emotions, especially when their logic and all those things are connected with it, they may have an emotional power that will shut a man down sometimes in conversation.
Sure.
Because they're just they're dynamically aware of their feelings, and they are maybe more trained in how to express it, where until men evolve kind of in themselves, we may not have the language skills and the understanding of our emotions. We may know what they are, but we may not be to express them as clear. But anyway, so I'm just saying I've experienced that same thing in a variety of ways when you're engaging with someone who is so very in their space that you're like, wow, okay, I got to pause for a second to gather where I'm at so I can be able to engage with this person.
Yeah. And then, so one of the last things that, that we were talking about, one of the reasons that things get driven so far apart. So you gave the example of society with men. It's a social convention, a social constraint, a social dynamic that is the reason that men don't express themselves as well as they could, is because we're told that we shouldn't, or that it's a weakness, or this, that, and the other thing, and we're raised that way. That's all because we're acting below the level of recognition, and we're being told certain things, and we're being influenced by other people and their ability to lead us along. We don't, if we're below the level of, where's your attention? I don't know. Where are your habits? I don't know. What are you doing with yourself right now? I don't know. I'm following the string of another person, basically. And one of the things that also sets this up for humanity are these limited beliefs. And that does come also from the fifth destroyer, in addition, in conjunction with other destroyers. So yesterday at the clinic, somebody was saying that they were feeling peaceful. And they're like, well, for right now, anyway, that's the best we can do, right? Moments of peace. And I'm like, well, where's a principle in the universe that says that you can only have vague, moments of relaxation and inner peace? Like, where's the underlining principle that says that you're supposed to feel raging anger? You'll see people say that, like, it's natural, go ahead and just feel your anger and, be angry. And I'm not saying that if you've arrived at anger that you should suppress it or anything else. You've arrived there, that's a different story. But our society is perpetuating these limited beliefs that this is natural, that this is okay, that men shouldn't do this and that women should do that. And, when I was watching the Barbara Walters special, we're not that far removed from when women simply weren't allowed to be co-hosts. You know, they had to have a different title because only men were qualified, because they believed that only men would be able to do it, that they're only smart, and, you know, they're the only ones smart enough to host a television show. And it's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, why would a man be innately better? But it's these things that we tell ourselves, and that's a part of these other destroyers. So people are, this is one of the things that we call leaking power. Leaking power is getting down on yourself or repeating a limited belief to yourself, telling yourself things where intelligence and desire are super, super duper far apart at that point. So that's another reason that these things get perpetuated. We tell ourselves that having a lot of money is success. So we look at somebody like Elon Musk, we look at somebody like Warren Buffett, and we're like, this is what we should model. Never mind the fact that the rest of their lives are complete shambles because there's no continuity in the other aspects. So I would say that one of the fundamental things that we do to ourselves and that we allow other people to do to us is to provide and perpetuate limited beliefs, thoughts that just don't really have any foundation in logic, deduction, principle, and reason. There's no reason that a woman couldn't be a television anchor. What the hell? Like, what are we even talking about? There's no physical
Or a doctor or a congressman or president.
Exactly. So oftentimes the limited beliefs, the things that we tell ourselves and the things that we allow other people to tell us are the reason that we don't have continuity in our whole entire life, and it's segmented. So that's another reason that we call leaking power. And when we get into the counterbalance phase, so we go from basic alignment or the introduction phase to counterbalance. Counterbalance, one of the very first things that we need to redirect using our rule of three are these limited beliefs, the things we tell ourselves that we can't do, or even what is the definition of success? That's a limited belief that success equals more money or more adoration or, you know, notoriety, that these are the characteristics. That is all just limited belief from a society that has been fundamentally existing below the level of personal power, conscious recognition, and active mind state. So yeah, so that just kind
I
of
see that dissolving. I know that you go, I hope so, but I really see it dissolving. I think all the exposure of it right now is crumbling. I think Elon Musk, everyone believing that he's a god is crumbling. I really think that, you know, it's being revealed.
Well,
Yeah.
here's the reason that it can't. Because the thinking isn't reducing. The overall amount of thought in the common mind and the average mind isn't really reducing. Maybe when they do a little bit of yoga or they do a little bit of Tai Chi or they do a little bit of playing chess, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a deliberate practice that will reduce the overall amount of thought by large percentages.
I know what you're
That's
talking
what's
about. I
required.
just see the desire for it increasing. I see the being the common thoughts that we had about success and things are changing in lots of people around me. They're not quite sure what to do with it.
I don't
But
disagree. Yeah. And
yeah, but the
I
overall
think
amount
things can happen simultaneously in a sense that people are like, okay, well, social media is a perfect example of its exposure. People are realizing there's many other ways to live, and that's the dialogue. People are realizing, wow, there's a lot of other options I have to formulate myself. I can actually craft my life. I don't think that's even a concept that people really saw in other generations, that you could actually craft your lifestyle.
Mhm.
People now see it very clearly because they see so many other people who are living, but then at the same challenge that brings up a lot of contrast, comparison, and a lot more thinking about. So it's these things are happening not like one versus the other. They're kind of all happening kind of together. It's very interesting because, like you said, I see there's a people who are really questioning what a successful life looks like, and then there's that question of, oh well, what is other people doing and how their life looks. It's this. That's why this practice is so ideal, because I think it brings us to a place where you can be aware of what's going on, but not necessarily. And because if you have the spirit of awareness, you don't get bogged into like, oh well, you can still keep you can be beyond that. That circle. You're not below the spear. You can be on the other side of it and integrate what is healthy, what does success look like for you, and not, in a sense, judge it in an awareness of another person's success, but still draw some some insights from other people, but it doesn't quantify your experience per se.
Right.
Yeah, I haven't really seen, I see that that desire is there, that more peace, more kindness, is it that awareness, that they're not assuming that people who have lots of money must be really smart and therefore we should follow them or let them lead us, or even if they even if they're lying about how much money, like it, I think the power structure is changing. I don't see in quite that many people yet that they've connected that to the thought. I think that they recognize the things they want to change and the outlooks. They would like their lens to be different. They're trying to have a different lens, but I don't think the how to do it has occurred to them yet. I think they're still in the place where I was, which was if I just had more time to do more yoga, if I had just had more time to go get a massage and to get acupuncture and to join my, maybe I should go back to karate. And I don't think that the connection between being a deliberate thinker is caught fire quite yet. Although there are certainly a lot of books out there that point to that made bestseller lists, but like I said, like Ernest said many times, is that there's not a how-to there. There may be some great insights about being the watcher and different parts of the mind and embodying a Buddhist practice, but there's not really a lot of how to, and there's not a lot of practice points that help people to do that.
Yeah, and in addition to that, so we do have cognitive behavioral therapy, we do have mindfulness-based stress relief. Mindfulness is officially a buzzword now, so people are interested. But one of the things that is so I will always differentiate what I've kind of accumulated and combined myself and what I have learned from other people and what they have helped me with. So when we do that Superman Qigong, I got that from Joshua Grant. I'm going to credit him because I didn't invent that. When I do concentric circles, I made that up myself because I wanted a Qigong that had a little bit of everything in one movement. So I made that myself. And so I kind of credit myself for that, or I credit intelligence and all of that, not Ernest per se. But the one thing that just isn't being addressed across the board, and this is the thing that needs to change in society for it to be a true evolutionary change, is the imbalance of the sheer volume of thought from the time that a person wakes up, from the time that they go to bed. That is not being addressed one iota. What I do see is people going from one type of thinking to another type of thinking, thinking that the new thinking is better thinking. And to some extent, that can be somewhat accurate. But then you get younger people who are saying one thing, but I see what they're doing out here when they're partying. I see the trash that they're leaving on the beach. I see that their behavior, and so if we looked at their triangles, are not aligned. They are not symmetrical, and they're not creating the balance that we're talking about here. So there are certain aspects to what we're doing with the bridge system and Qigong, which is my way of just delivering sheer technique. This is all technique. This is the things that you're going to do with your mind, with your attention, with your voice, with your go do it. Let me know how it works out, because that's that practice. The bridge is a framework. It includes a lot of definitions, a lot of theory, a lot of principle, and I think that's great too. But at a certain point, once we got that, we need technique. We need to know, what are we doing to cross the divide between theory and application? And one of the things, there's actually a few others, and that's why the 20 essential teachings are, some of these are unique to me, that I've never heard them before. I didn't necessarily get them from outside sources. Whereas if I say, paying attention to shadows, I got that from Carlos Castaneda. Walking and fox walking, a lot of that came from Thich Nhat Hanh, in the way that walk with me and be present and engage your walk. So some of these things have come from other minds and other teachers and people that I've learned from. But the overall volume of thought is one of those that I just don't see that anywhere else. And if we just go from one type of thinking to another type of thinking, the imbalance will remain. And we will still find ourselves in another boat of suffering, because the principle is that existing in an extreme will cause the system to rebalance. It needs to rebalance itself. And that happens so abruptly, so quickly, that it can be exceptionally difficult to adapt. We see that in nature. If an ecosystem changes too quickly, if it exists in an extreme for too long, everything in that ecosystem is going to have a very hard time adapting. It might be able to, then again, it might not, and it will perish. Same thing with the human experience. If we don't find gaps in the overall amount of thinking, that imbalance will remain. I'm not a fortune teller, though, so I can't always say, what is going to be the direct result of this imbalance? Like, what will that suffering look like exactly? I don't know, because I don't see the future. But what I do see is that some sort of psychological and physical suffering on a global scale will continue to occur as long as the thinking mind is engaged in the sheer volume of thought that it currently is. The one thing that can save the human species is finding balance in our thinking mind, because when we do that, we don't identify with it as much, we don't cling and attach to it as much. We start to create space, and then all of a sudden these other aspects of our cognition, logic, deduction, reason, these things start to shine as well. So now we're working with the full extent of the evolution of consciousness so far, such as humor and music and imagination and caring and kindness with other people. These are the results of the evolution of consciousness. One reason that human beings have evolved is because we're willing to take care of one another when we're sick and injured. The human species wouldn't evolve if, when William breaks his leg, we're just like, well, fuck it. I'm not carrying him. I'm not going to help him. Like that's not good for me. So once we started to care about one another, our consciousness and our bodies and everything continued to evolve. So in order to get back to the place of evolution and adaptability, and that's what I call the hydrostasy effect, those 5 things that I wrote down, those are the characteristics of the hydrostasy effect. We're in that bubble of balance and peace, and we can see it and we can feel it. We know when we're going away from it. We know when we're going towards it. We know that it's not stagnant, so we're always going to be surfing a little bit. Basements will flood, space junk will fall from the sky, we will get injured, ... But until the overall volume of thought is reduced on a global scale, we will continue to go from one type of suffering to another type of suffering. So I do see what you're saying, Donna, and I don't
have to just believe you on that, and you don't have to convince me on that, because you've just described what I just said about myself. Right. And about and using William and as an example. Look what happens when I apply those principles. When I am in the boxing ring, or I'm teaching Tai Chi, or I'm doing Tai Chi, where's my overall volume of thinking? Right. Where is my mind? Where is my attention and intention? And how do I navigate and adapt accordingly? And when I am not in doing Tai Chi, when I'm pick some clunky circumstance that you're less practiced at and that you need a beginner mind to go through. I don't know you well enough to pick one of those. And then apply the concepts. Well, that's when we coast, that's when we hustle ourselves, that's when we fall on old habits, all the destroyers come into play, right? That's when we have to go back to the beginner mind and reduce the overall amount of thinking so that we can become more adaptable in this situation. And so if we have a practice that we can go back to, then we become more adaptable. I know what happens when I'm not adaptable, and when the overall volume of thinking takes over, I get sick. I get physically injured and I get sick. That's what happens to me. And so, and I don't have to be that far off for that long for it to occur. My body tells me immediately, and and I end up in the ER. So I know that there's an imbalance there in my physical practice. So I'm going to address that. But so when you talk about society as a whole, and about all the same principles still apply. So whether I could believe you or not believe you, I could say you're optimistic or pessimistic, it doesn't matter. I can see those principles apply to me when I have the sheer overall volume of thinking in my mind taking over, or when it's quieted, or when I'm more deliberate and focused with my attention, and how well or how poorly, I adapt.
Mhm.
So it makes perfect sense that since I am just an individual expression of the universe as a whole, I am that it should apply to society and the human race as well.
Mhm. Yep.
Makes sense.
All right. I think that's good for today.
All right, I have a quick question.
Yes.
You discussed prior to class today, topic 1, 2, and 3. You skipped over topic 4, which was establishing presence.
Right.
What we've talked about that last time, and today we talked about topic 5,
The voice
which
of
is
power.
attention and intention
Voice of
coming
power.
together to be the voice of power. Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So we
And then-
go on to topic 6 next Tuesday, correct?
Which is the, yes, so the first core of the 20 topics is establishing presence. And then, of course, so next week is the trick of emphasis, where we talk about the second core of the practice. So the second core of the practice is learning to emphasize objects or aspects of your environment in advance. That's how hustling yourself, you're not really cherry picking and hustling yourself are a little bit different, because when you're hustling yourself, you may actually think that you're doing the practice. You may actually think that you're being mindful. You may actually think that you're creating space. But then upon further examination, it's like, oh no, wait a second. I guess I wasn't really, doing it the way that we've been talking about it, which is the reason. And this is another aspect that I didn't learn from someone else, is that you have to determine your points of attention in advance to make sure that they have power. Power means attention and intention. When those two things are there, then we're giving something power. And if our points of attention aren't intended and, in advance deliberately, we have a lot of opportunity to coast and to cherry pick, and then also to hustle ourselves. We think we're practicing, are you present? And you're like, yeah, I was totally present. Where were your points of attention? Well, I was kind of feeling into the dimensional body of.
All right, that was me. Don't make fun of me.
Well, other people did that too.
I'm just kidding.
If I were to fall out of the sky and say, William, where is your mind now? I want to hear what did you intend today? Like where did you intend at the beginning of the day, or out of your pool of techniques? Because with more practice, we develop more techniques, peripheral vision, paying attention to different shapes. In the beginning, you can name things around you, so there's all kinds of techniques that we can develop that can be a part of our toolbox. And that's still intended in advance because it's in your toolbox. But if we're not intending it in advance, we're going to have huge gaps throughout the day where we're not practicing at all. Other gaps where we think that we are, or maybe we intended to, but we're actually not. So
the first core element is
establishing
establishing presence.
Establishing presence. Yeah. It's not necessarily emphasizing in advance, although with the Qigong practice, we'll do both simultaneously. So from day one in the Qigong practice, we start to deliberately intend our points of attention in advance on day one. But for the sake of, breaking down the material so it can be shared, establishing presence is different than intending points of attention in advance, because there's some people who they're just not, they need to gain some practice in coming back to the present moment. Here I am in this life, in this body, I am present. And that's going to be enough work for them before they can start intending the color blue for the day, or the Dantian or CV17 is where I'm going to put my mind today, or all throughout the day, I'm going to imagine the macrocosmic orbit. That could be a little heavy to the beginner, as we've seen. But the Qigong practice, it's under the assumption that you have an idea of what we're doing from the bridge, and now we're going to do it. So it is a beginner practice, but it's also very intensive from the very beginning.
So that is to maintain emphasis.
Yes. So the third core is maintaining emphasis.
Okay. Second core is choosing in advance.
Yes.
Establishing principles.
Mhm.
Sorry. These core principles that you're talking about right now are related to Qigong practice that you're establishing, or this is all? I'm trying to make a distinction. Are we talking? I know that they're extension of each other to bridge from mindfulness. But when you start talking about the core principles, kind of, I know I didn't know if you were talking about specifically in relation to Qigong practice right now.
They will be in the Qigong practice, but I'm never going to explain it. We're just going to do it, right?
So the
So
core principles that Donna is mentioning.
Mhm.
It's the core, it's the whole core principles of the practice.
Of the bridge.
Qigong is just the physical part of that practice. The first core principle is establishing presence
Right.
in the whole bridge system.
Okay, good. I just didn't know because we were talking about the numbers where we're at, and then you kind of jump back. So I was just making sure that, because you were talking about you were covering principle 5 today, and so then I was just making sure that I was following that.
So essentially we have 20
topics 1 through 5.
We have 20, I'll explain it real quick. We have 20 topics. In those 20 topics are 6 cores.
Oh, okay, 20 topics.
And in those 20 topics are also 5 gates. And we'll talk about these separately. The gates are for hydrostasy, for the gates of seeing. Basically, when I say seeing, I mean, again, cleansing your lens of perception, your point of view changes, your perspective changes, your perception itself, like a hallucinogen, changes, in a manner of speaking. Yeah. But the cores are what we used to call pillars. And we could still call them the pillars, but every practice has a pillar. So I'm like, let's do something a little bit different. I also don't want to use the word mindfulness as much. So I'm not calling the second pillar mindfulness. I'm calling it establishing emphasis. So the first core is establishing presence. The second core is establishing emphasis. And the third core is maintaining emphasis. The only way that we can maintain emphasis is using the redirection technique, the rule of 3. We can't maintain if we don't continue to go back to it, go back to it, go back to it. I'm thinking some stupid shit. Let's go back to the practice. That's the redirection technique. Now, the fourth core is deliberate modulation. And deliberate modulation, you could put in parentheses, emotional memory. The fifth core is sensing energy, or sensing the essence of the moment. And we could look at that as storing or processing new emotional memories. And then, of course, we'll be able to recall these at will. And then
one more time, 7, please. Sensing energy and
sensing energy, or sensing the essence.
Sensing the essence.
This is a form of processing memory. We're processing aspects of the present moment into our emotional memory that we can later recall if we so choose. Such as the vacation feeling. When you go on vacation, you have a certain feeling. I actually can recall that, and there's also some situational things, you feel certain things through different situations. If all of a sudden it's 40 to 50 degrees outside, I walk outside, I'm going to have that same feeling that I had when I was a kid and the weather changed and it was warm outside. And I'm like, yeah. And that's all emotional memory. And then the sixth core is what I call the hydrostatic effect. And it will be directly relatable to those 5 aspects that I just showed you guys today. Those are the characteristics of the hydrostatic effect. That's how you know you're in it, is because you'll have those 5 characteristics. But it's also the key source of adaptability. If you are in those 5 aspects, you will adapt to situations much better. We'll all adapt to the world much better. And if we can adapt gracefully and with the least amount of energy necessary to adapt, we have efficiency, we will continue to evolve. Our mind will evolve, our body will evolve, everything will start to evolve together. And then before you know it, you have a society where men aren't, chastised for being emotional. But then again, we don't want to be emotional wrecks. We want to find balance between these two, right? So balance will still always be the principle. And while balance is always changing, that's what evolution is. If we exist in an extreme, it forces it to change so quick that it can be either difficult or almost impossible to adapt to. And then, of course, if we can't adapt, we will perish. Or in some cases, if we look at it psychologically, we will suffer greatly for it, physically and psychologically. So this is covering when someone will say, oh, but balance is relative. Absolutely, balance is relative, but you have felt on a skateboard when you are balanced and when you aren't balanced. So A, you know what it feels like, and B, although balance is relative and balance is always changing, if you exist in an extreme that is outside of that balance, it will cause the overall system to try to create balance around that, homeostasis or balance around that. So for example, our star will go supernova. And that's an extreme because it was existing in an extreme for so long, it just couldn't do it anymore. It explodes. It will create a new solar system. So it will rebalance, right? That won't be beneficial to human beings or all life on Earth because we will perish, because it will be very difficult for us to adapt to that extreme of a change. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
All right. Yeah. And then so we'll get into the gates another time.
So
right.
next week, we're talking about the second core, maintaining presence, intending
Yes.
in advance. And we're talking about topic number 5, which is,
Oh, so topic number 5 is the voice of power.
oh, no, I'm sorry. Topic number 6, we're talking
Is
about next
is
week.
is what I call the trick of emphasis, or learning to establish emphasis.
And that goes along with the second. Okay, I see.
The
Yeah.
second core, yes.
That is the second core. Yeah. Establishing emphasis is learning to determine your points of emphasis in advance. And then after the trick of emphasis is maintaining emphasis, which is the third core, and that will be our topic about the rule of 3.
That's next Tuesday. Okay.
That would be the well, next Tuesday is the second core. The Tuesday after that is the third core.
Okay. I got you.
Yeah.
Establish emphasis. All right.
And the cores are also original to this system. I can't credit anybody else necessarily. Again, it's not about Ernest. This isn't a projection of ego. I'm just saying that, you know, I can't credit another person necessarily for some of these things. Actually, a lot of this, the 4 directions of attention I came to, the destroyers I came to, non-interference I borrowed, that's karma yoga, but yeah, the hydrostatic effect is original. The enemies of knowledge is original, but also was inspired by Carlos Castaneda and Don Juan with the enemies of knowledge. My enemies are different than his enemies and how I describe them because it's a different purpose. But yeah, sometimes the phrases that I've used have been borrowed, such as the destroyers. The word destroyers is also borrowed from Don Juan and Carlos Castaneda.
Yeah, I've read a couple of that whole trilogy and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with some of the things when listening to you, I've read some and I see some parallels.
Yeah.
But it's no big deal. I mean, on a side note, I know that there's a reason why you need to emphasize that, and so I respect that. But when I'm listening to you, in my mind, there's no. But it's different because this is something you've established and developing, and you're trying to make some distinctions. But as a person who's just listening to you, that doesn't go through my mind. Like, is this borrowed from someone else, or is he? You know, I mean, and I know that there's a particular reason why you have to establish that as a fundamental. But just as a person who's listening, I guess from my perspective, it's just that. It goes kind of back to what Donna said. People have unique skill sets in the ability to almost reverse engineer stuff so that it's really accessible. And so through years of study, I've read certain things and come across different teachers and who pointed out similar things. But it's like you said, it was clearly, regardless if it's an original thought from you, but even beyond that, what's original is the ability to bring it together in this fashion. Like, I mean, so that's what I take away. It's not like I care about me personally. And I know you have a total different reason why you have to establish that. But for me, it's not about, are any of these thoughts original? It's that they are accessible. It's like, that's the strength of this practice, is that you have the ability to put these things together in a way that for someone who may have done years of study and has had many experiences with this information, the way that you're bringing it together, the way your particular mind works, it's very, I mean, that's kind of like, for me, besides, is the most unique beautiful thing about what you're doing. It's not so much, I don't care where they come from, actually, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
but I know but I do care about the practicality of them, because that's the benefit, I think, that an advanced practitioner or a beginner or any place along the line of journey will be able to gain from it.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And then you can see,
Before you go, an interesting show that might, if anybody's looking for something, is I watched last night, which was kind of interesting, the Dalai Lama and Bishop Tutu from South Africa. There's some documentary about joy, and they're both on there together talking about their friendship that they've developed over many years. And it's very interesting, just the playfulness and the joy they have together. Just something that two people that
where is it?
I think it's on Netflix. I mean, I know you
Okay.
I know you're not on Netflix, Ernest, and I don't know about you, Donna, but it just happened to be on Netflix. It's something about, it might be some other places too. It's probably many other places, but it might be on YouTube, but it's I forgot what it's called. Something about it's Bishop Tutu and the Dalai Lama on joy. If you look that up, it'll pull up the documentary. It's just worthwhile listening to those two men in their development and their also differences in how they built a friendship.
Yeah, that sounds cool. I think I've actually seen a preview or a clip from it. Because I remember Tutu in his eyes, you know, they were talking about like, the shine and the shimmer in his eyes, you know, was very,
and like what we talked about here, he's had a lot of health complications and challenges, and in that he talks a little bit about just that. Like they both talked to them about the hardship in the lives they've experienced and how they've been able to maintain joy and not turn that into necessarily a bitterness towards the oppressors or those who wronged them.
Right. Yeah, and who knows better about that than Dalai Lama and Tutu, for sure. Yeah. All right, cool. So I will see you guys on Thursday. Sunday, I'm going to do Qigong. Qigong is just follow along. So, I mean, the way that you learn is just doing it, following along. And then if you can incorporate that into a daily practice, I like to incorporate Qigong into a 3-part practice: morning, afternoon, and evening. Sometimes I get to evening, sometimes I don't, but you know, I'm gaining more momentum in my own practices as well. But yeah, so we'll have that on Sunday. So
What
also,
time?
Sunday at, I think we said 8 a.m. Does that sound right? I'll have to look back in the chat, but I think we said 8 a.m. on Sunday for a Qigong practice.
9 a.m. for me, but yes.
Okay, yeah. But that's it. I do have one-on-one availability for Qigong if anybody was interested, but it's just you two, so probably not. But yeah, just let me know. And then I'll post that in the group in case anybody's interested. But okay, so I'll see you guys Thursday for our just regular group study. All right.
Have a great day.
See you guys.
Well.
Bye.
Take care.
Yeah, you too.